All right. Happy Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrinasalvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, every other Sunday. And of course, I do want to give you guys a very quick update. I did just speak to, of course, my comrade JB from RBN. He is still in the hospital, but he is doing a lot better today than he was the other day, which is good news. So I know some of you are wondering how he's doing. So yeah, it does seem like he's feeling better. He's doing better. So yeah, I know he can't wait to go home. So I wanted to give you guys a quick update about that. And I want to give a shout out to everyone on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble, and welcome back, fam. If you haven't done so, please make sure you answer that poll question. I'm curious to see what you guys think about that. And we will get to that story later on. I want to go ahead and start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat, ladies and gentlemen. And Scott Ritter will be joining us tonight as well. We have quite a bit to discuss. Greetings, New York Varsity says the GOP got Gabbard, RFK, and Musk. The DNC got the Cheneys. LOL losers. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Greetings, CBC Voter says happy Thursday, Sabby Sabs and Eric. Greetings, Tim, though. Hell, no, ain't nobody voting for no Stephen A. I flow where the wind goes to stay relevant, Smith. FOH. He's a blackface in high place. Oop. He's what stands in the way of actual change. Free Gaza. Shout out to GG. God damn. They not feeling Stephen A. Smith, but don't people realize he is the best the duopoly could do? Don't hate the player, hate the duopoly. Hashtag green PSL or third party for me from now on. Interesting. Shout out to Dave, says, hello, Sabby. You can sing very well. Did you sing in the church? Briefly when I was younger. And no, I didn't lead or anything. So I was backup. We will have a Black woman president in 2036. She will be in the Green Party. Interesting. Shout out to Lauren, says free Palestine. Greetings, Hannah, says Scott is back. Shout out to Moo Moo Kachu. The difference in discourse between Elon's Nazi salute and Kanye's rants and Trump turning away from Ukraine versus Gaza is a trip to see. People are really showing their hypocritical sides this month. Shout out to Trell. If Stephen Smith takes big corporate donor money, you can for sure count me out. Interesting. I don't know if Stephen A. Smith knows about this show or not, but this is very interesting. Shout out to Kimi, says, everyone be sure to like, sub, and share like a what? That's right. Like a Care Bear. Thank you so much. Shout out to Sakina, says, hello, Sabby and fam. Shout out to Chrome, says, Sabby, fact that 10 people said yes to Stephen A. Smith is pathetic. LOL. I know. I don't know if Stephen A. Smith wants to see this poll or not so far. Shout out to C. Shata, says, a Sabby. And greetings, Brian, says, these quizzes are too easy. Shout out to Mary Beth, says, hello, Sabby, Eric, and chat crew. I just set up my monthly donation to Butch Ware for California governor. I'm in San Francisco. Well, do the damn thing, Mary Beth. Greetings, Miranda, says, hello, all. And shout out to Dwayne, giving a shout out there to Kimi. And greetings, or I said Dwayne, sorry, I meant to hit Mika. Greetings, Mika says, hey, Sabby plus fam. All right. We're going to go ahead and dive in. I don't want to keep you guys waiting because, like I said, Scott Ritter is going to be joining us as well. And there's a couple of stories I want to cover before Scott joins. And I think I may have one more after he joins, but we have quite a bit to dive into tonight. Tonight's theme is the last laugh. And as we go through the stories, I want you to try to figure out, who do you think gets the last laugh? And I'm pretty sure with one of these stories, you can probably already answer that question, but we're going to get into it, folks. First and foremost, let's give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really appreciate you around here. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories. I'm laughing because the comments about Stephen A. Smith is really funny. Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters. Yes, you got those guys too. Don't forget about those Sabbies. You know, they're just doing their damn thing, holding that sandwich together. And we also have members. Thank you guys so much for your support. You can see all of their names listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen on the ticker. I want to give a shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. The other ones I already shouted out, so I have to update, but let's give a shout out to Breezy for becoming a new Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you around here, fam. So without further ado, what are we discussing tonight? Again, the theme is the last laugh. Who gets the last laugh? Let's go ahead and share that beautiful thumbnail. Roll that beautiful bean footage. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing, of course, Scott Ritter is going to join us a little bit later in the show. He has quite a bit to discuss. We're going to get into Trump's recent remarks about cutting that military budget. We're going to talk about the Gaza plan. We're going to talk about his negotiations here with Vladimir Putin. We're going to get into all of that with Scott. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard by now, and we'll have to add another one to this, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. have now been officially confirmed. Confirmed. Yeah, buddy. How did Democrats mess this up? I'm going to get into that. We're also discussing Stephen A. Smith for president. What? Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, there's some buzz happening around all that. There's a poll question there related to that. Let me know what you think. We're also going to discuss pundits shame Gazans. You'll see that's Jesse Waters there from Fox News, but he's not the only one. We actually are going to have pundits from CNN and Fox News shaming the Palestinian people. And of course, They will be put in their place. And last but not least, everyone needs to pay attention to what is happening here with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders copies new movement. And what is the role of Bernie Sanders? We are going to get into all of that, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, if you haven't done so, smash that like button. If you're new, don't forget to sub or share. And we're going to get started. Why don't we get started with that breaking news, ladies and gentlemen? Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. have been confirmed by the Senate. So it is official. They are going to assume these roles that Trump has assigned to them. What did the Democratic Party do wrong here? We're going to get into that. First and foremost, this was that confirmation for Tulsi Gabbard.
All right, we have breaking news now. We have been watching, monitoring while that hearing was going on Doge. We will get right back to it. But for now, Tulsi Gabbard has enough votes to become the next Director of National Intelligence. This would be the 14th member confirmed of Trump's choices for the cabinet. 6 more to go. I understand that as the count that we are.
Okay. So Tulsi Gabbard has been confirmed, ladies and gentlemen, as the Director of National Intelligence. Now, don't get it twisted. Everyone did not vote for Tulsi Gabbard, I'm sure, as you can imagine, but she did receive that majority vote. I do want to show you her taking her oath. So I want to go ahead and bring up that image here. Let's get into that. Here we go.
I would say Pam was right up there with her, Pam Bondi. She had a lot. I didn't need, I know her a little bit better, and you're doing a fantastic job after about 3 or 4 days, right? You've had a lot of experience, but you've never seen anything like this, Pam, but you're going to do fantastic as the Attorney General, fantastic. So thank you and congratulations. We did this with Pam a few days ago, and this is again my honor. So congratulations to Tulsi, and I think Pam is going to administer the oath, and when she does that, I'll sign your new certificate. Good, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Please place your left hand on the Constitution and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear
I, Tulsi Gabbard, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
that I take this obligation freely
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
Oh, boy.
Now, how did we get here, ladies and gentlemen? How did we get here? And I want you to think about who gets the last laugh with this particular story. How did we get here? You know, I think a lot of us remember that Tulsi Gabbard was a part of the Democratic Party, and her career in the Democratic Party was stopped abruptly when Tulsi Gabbard decided to do something that, of course, the donor class did not want her to do. Some people would say that it's the Democrats' fault that Tulsi Gabbard went this way, that Tulsi Gabbard is on Team Trump. And there's a lot of people that we can point fingers at. We can also say that Tulsi may be just an opportunist. I've said this before. I think that Tulsi Gabbard is an opportunist. I think she goes where is going to be best for her career politically. There are a number of things that I disagree with Tulsi Gabbard on. One of them being, of course, Israel. She is very, very wrong on that particular issue. She's also said some things that are Islamophobic. I'm heavily against that. A number of things. But she still got in. And what I want to show you is that there's one person who voted against Tulsi that I feel probably should have voted for Tulsi because of what Tulsi did for them. If we pull up this here, we can see how every senator voted on Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. And I just want to jump right to the chase. Let's just get right to it, honey buns. You can see that there were 52 votes to support Tulsi Gabbard, and there were 48 votes to oppose Tulsi Gabbard. And you will see that 2 independents opposed Tulsi Gabbard. So let's go ahead and jump down here and let's just get straight to the point. Opposes Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders and, of course, Angus King, the other independent, and he's from Maine, they voted to oppose Tulsi Gabbard. Now, we can just put Angus to the side for a second, okay? Just slide over there right now, Angus. And let's talk about Bernie Sanders. If there is anyone who probably maybe owes Tulsi a something, it's Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was one of the people that stood up for Tulsi Gabbard and said she is not a Russian agent. You can still find the tweets on Twitter today. He said it's ridiculous the way that people are coming after Tulsi Gabbard. Of course, this was years ago. He stood up in defense of Tulsi Gabbard. But he decided to vote against her to confirm her for a part of the Director of National Intelligence. Now, my question to Bernie Sanders is this. If you spoke up for Tulsi Gabbard years ago when you said, stop calling her a Russian agent, that's ridiculous, and you said that she served her country, what was it that made you vote against her for this particular position? Because you had her back a couple of years ago. And the only thing that I can think of is the fact that Bernie was playing partisan politics. And of course, the Democrats did not want Tulsi Gabbard. And so Bernie Sanders was going along with the Democratic Party and what they want. I want to remind you of a time when Tulsi actually put her career on the line by making this decision. Let's go all the way back to the 2016 election. Listen to this.
As a vice chair of the DNC, I'm required to stay neutral in Democratic primaries, but I cannot remain neutral any longer. The stakes are just too high. That's why today I'm endorsing Senator Bernie Sanders to be our next president and commander-in-chief of the United States. We need a commander-in-chief who has foresight, who exercises good judgment, and who understands the need for a robust foreign policy which defends the safety and security of the American people, and who will not waste precious lives and money on interventionist wars of regime change. Such counterproductive wars undermine our national security and economic prosperity. As these elections continue across the country, the American people are faced with a very clear choice. We can elect a president who will lead us into more interventionist wars of regime change, or we can elect a president who will usher in a new era of peace and prosperity. It's with this clear choice in mind that I'm resigning as vice chair of the DNC so that I can strongly support Bernie Sanders as the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And now I ask you, stand with me and support Bernie Sanders.
So at that point in time, Tulsi Gabbard was the vice chair of the DNC. Goot said, is this AI? No, that was Tulsi Gabbard back in 2016. She endorsed Bernie Sanders because honestly, between Bernie and Hillary, that was the right person to endorse. And that pretty much ruined her career in the Democratic Party because Hillary Clinton was done with her after that. And I think we all know the Clintons still have a strong hold on the Democratic Party. When she made that pivot and she turned on Hillary Clinton, the Clintons made sure, we're going to make sure that this woman's career will never expand in the Democratic Party. And that's exactly what they did. But I would say that Tulsi did the right thing at that time. Now, fast forward to 2020 and Tulsi Gabbard decides to run for president through the Democratic Party. She goes to the debates and she pretty much ends Kamala Harris's chances on the debate stage by telling the truth about Kamala Harris's record, which a lot of people didn't know at that point in time. And then later on, she suspends her campaign because she does not meet the requirements to continue on as a candidate. But I would also say they increased the requirements. Then she goes on to endorse Joe Biden. And I believe this was Tulsi Gabbard's last, I guess, hoorah, or her last struggle here to try to make some type of inroad in the Democratic Party. That decision to endorse Joe Biden instead of Bernie Sanders. This time she says, you know what? I'm not going to do the Bernie thing again this time because that's not worked out well for me. So maybe I'm just going to go ahead and go along with the status quo and endorse Joe Biden. That's the thing about Tulsi Gabbard. She flip-flops when it comes to the issues. She's already flip-flopped on her decision about being against surveilling Americans. She already flipped on that in order to continue, I guess, with this potential role. That being said, though, Bernie Sanders, of all people, Tulsi Gabbard stood by you when no one else did. She went against the establishment at that point in time when no one else was willing to do so. So Tulsi Gabbard was pretty much ostracized from the Democratic Party. She decides to leave the Democratic Party. She says she's an independent. The next thing you know, she becomes a little bit more welcomed on the Republican side of the aisle. And then she announces, you know what? I am going to join the Republican Party. So she joins the Republican Party. And the next thing you know, she's helping with the Trump campaign, et cetera. And then he nominates her for the Director of National Intelligence. Now, who gets the last laugh? Because Tulsi Gabbard, even though she was pushed out of the Democratic Party, she still finds herself in a position, different administration, but she still finds herself in a position, one that's pretty high up there. I ask you that same question about RFK Jr., who also was just confirmed by the Senate. Listen to this.
We are there. RFK Jr. has been confirmed by the full Senate as the HHS secretary. We're watching on the right side of our screen, and we have moved into that position now with another cabinet member in place for President Trump. And senior correspondent on Congress, Chad Pergram, is with me now. So, Chad, it was just a couple minutes before I saw you last time. This went quickly.
Yeah, and sometimes the waiting is the hardest part here on Capitol Hill, as Tom Petty might say. They sat on 50 votes for quite a while. We didn't think that there was going to be a problem confirming RFK Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, but Rick Scott, the Republican senator from Florida, he came in and voted yes, and that pushed it over the edge. And immediately after him, Peter Welch, the Democratic senator from Vermont, he came in and voted no. This is a party line vote except for one vote. Mitch McConnell, the former Republican leader from Kentucky, he voted no. He was also the only nay yesterday on the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. I should note what's interesting here with McConnell is that he voted to break a filibuster on both nominees. Sometimes you have a senator say, OK, let's just get to the end of this process. I oppose the issue. I oppose the bill. I oppose the nominee, but I'm not going to hold it up. Sometimes they will try to hold it up as much as they can. Mitch McConnell did not have the votes on his side. We're waiting to see if there's a statement here from Mitch McConnell. I notice when he puts out statements in favor of the nominees that he supports, that he does so in a full-throated fashion. He says, it is my pleasure to support so-and-so. But he had some grievances with Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary. He had grievances with Tulsi Gabbard, and he has, not held back when he has indicated why he voted against them. And remember that Mitch McConnell suffered from polio as a child and has really had some reservations about this nominee because of his past statements on vaccine.
Okay, let's go ahead and stop it there. So with RFK Jr.'s confirmation, Mitch McConnell voted against RFK Jr. So he went against what the Republican Party wanted. Mitch McConnell needs to retire, whatever. Anyway, RFK Jr. still got in. So you'll see that's why this vote is 51 instead of 52, because Mitch McConnell decided not to vote in favor of RFK Jr., but he still got in. Now, let's go back to what happened with RFK Jr. RFK Jr. ran as a Democrat, primarying Joe Biden at the time, and wanted to do this as a Democrat through the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party changed the rules to make it more difficult and said, basically, if you don't have this number of delegates or whatever in certain states, your votes are not going to count, et cetera. The tricks that they do. And then there was the money. They treated him the same way they did Jill Stein, trying to throw him off the ballot constantly. So then you're constantly having to raise money just to fight in court to stay on the ballot. Ultimately, RFK Jr. was like, this is ridiculous. So he leaves the Democratic Party and says he's running as an independent. Now, that does cost a lot of money to run as an independent candidate. But the Democrats pushed him in that direction. They didn't want Joe Biden to be challenged. And so this is how they treated him and Marianne Williamson and also Dean Phillips. So he ran as independent. Ultimately, he ended up spending a lot of money just to try to stay on the ballot. So he made an announcement. He said, we're not going to be able to continue this as an independent. I am going to stay on the ballot in the states that are not the swing states. And otherwise, I'm going to be helping Donald Trump with his presidential election. And then we know the rest of that story. Donald Trump won. Here's RFK Jr. being sworn in.
I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
I, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies,
against all enemies,
foreign and domestic,
foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely,
I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
on which I am about to enter.
on which I'm about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary.
So there's RFK Jr. He is now sworn in. And he went on to say this. I want to show you what he said on Fox News. And again, I'm not a fan of RFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard. I think their opinions on Israel are incredibly problematic. But RFK Jr. is good on this particular issue. Listen to what he said here about our food.
The qualifications that Senator Schumer is talking about there are the very qualifications that got us to where we are today. These are the people who got us to be the sickest country in the world. We are 4.2% of the world's population. We buy 70% of the pharmaceutical drugs on Earth. We spend 2 to 3 times what other countries pay for healthcare, and we have the worst health outcomes. We literally have the sickest population in the world. Those are the people that got us there. We do need a break. We need somebody different who can come in and say, I'm going to be a disruptor. I'm not going to let the food industry and the pharmaceutical industry run health policy anymore. We're going to turn health policy over to people who are actually concerned with public health.
Are all drug company grants?
Okay, so here's something I want to add about this. I totally agree with his statement about Big Pharma. Yes, it is a problem. But as I said before, RFK Jr. should be advocating for universal health care because obviously people do need health care. It is a necessity. We got to stop saying it's a right and say it's a necessity. It is something that people do need. So my thing to him was to take it a step further and say we need to make sure that people have health care in this country. That was my statement about that. when it comes to the food issue, because one of the things that he is heavily criticized is just how bad our food is in this country. And I told you guys before that if you travel to other countries, one of the things that you'll notice is that their food may taste a little bit different. They don't have all these like GMOs in their foods that we do. Oftentimes, they don't have a lot of sugar in their foods. And one of the things I will tell you is this. You guys know that I've been on a weightlifting journey, right? Ever since I started lifting, I've started to pay more attention to the type of foods that I eat. So my diet changed completely. And as I started to pay attention to what I was eating, I think people will be surprised to find out even some of the foods that you think are healthy are loaded with sodium. How many of you, raise your hand if you go to Panera, right? Panera was kind of like my go-to. I thought it was pretty healthy, getting a salad from Panera and like doing my damn thing. But I started to find out that if you look at the nutrition information of Panera online, you'll see that even a lot of their salads are loaded with sodium. A salad. You're better off making a salad at home. So we got to be very careful. A lot of these things that we go to these, like whether it's fast food or even if it's like a Panera, I told you guys even about Sweet Green. If you don't look at the nutrition guide, you might be very surprised to find that you think you're eating something healthy, but you're putting a lot of sodium and sugar into your body and you don't even know it. So there's that. Then there's even the food that you buy at the grocery store, which also a lot of times you think is healthy, but it's not really. So we have all these extra like chemicals and salt. A lot of salt in our food is something that people will tell you. Americans put a lot of salt and a lot of sugar in their food. And yes, that is a problem. That can raise your blood pressure, right? So that can cause all other types of issues down the road. So I agree with him with the food issue. I agree with him with the issues with Big Pharma. I think he's 100% on that. I think he should take it a step further and he should say that everybody needs to have healthcare in this country. That's where I would take it if I were RFK Jr., right? But the point that I want to make is this. How did we get here? We got here because the Democratic Party pushed these people away. If the Democratic Party, I would argue this, if the Democratic Party would have allowed a real primary against Joe Biden when there were people running against him, and they would have allowed an actual debate with RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson and all them on the debate stage with Joe Biden, RFK Jr. probably wouldn't have gone in this direction. This was his way of slapping the Democratic Party in the face. This was his way of telling the Democratic Party, screw you for trying to take me off the ballot in different states. So with Tulsi Gabbard, similar situation. Would Tulsi have gone over to the Trump team if the Democratic Party didn't try to jump her for getting out of line and not supporting Hillary Clinton? So I say this because I see a lot of Democrats that are online and they're very upset that RFK and Tulsi Gabbard were confirmed. But you need to ask yourself how it came to that. And so after everything that the Democratic Party did to Tulsi Gabbard and to RFK Jr., I would say at the end, they got the last laugh. Tulsi and RFK got the last laugh because they said, okay, well, screw you. I'll just go over to the other side. Now, what do I think should have happened? I think people like Tulsi Gabbard, RFK, Thomas Massie, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley. I think all of those people should be in a separate party. I don't think they should be a part of the Democratic Party. I don't think they should be a part of the Republican Party. But they decided to go through the two-party system, and here we are. Either way, it looks like they're moving on in those positions. And the Democratic Party is just sitting by and they're just wailing their arms. They don't know what to do. Hakeem Jeffries, we're going to talk about him Friday night. We're doing a deep dive into Hakeem Jeffries Friday night. Hakeem Jeffries is on Jon Stewart's show and he's telling him, well, I don't know. We don't know what to do and we can't do anything and we're not in power and da-da-da-da. These people are not fighters. And they literally sat there and they allowed people like Trump, Elon, Tulsi, RFK, they allowed people to basically walk all over them because they're passive. And this is what happens when you're passive. This is what happens when you sit by for all these years and you decide not to do anything for working people in this country. What happens? I told you this before. People go all the way over to the other side. And that's how we got here. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Dr. Daniel. Keep up the great work. Thank you and welcome. Thank you, Wandy. Elon is making $8 million a day off U.S. American taxpayers, but it wouldn't have gotten to that way. This is what I'm saying. The Democratic Party, if they would have decided not to jump Bernie Sanders in 2016 like they did, but he went along with it and let it happen. That's another part of the problem. If they would have decided not to do that and listen to what the people were saying about the billionaire money and the oligarchs, then they could have been the party to say, we are not going to take billionaire money. We are going to be different. We are going to be grassroots. But no, they won't do that. So that's how you get an Elon doing what he's doing right now in Trump's administration. MBD says Tulsi looks constable. What does that look like? Oh my God. A random Anna says, so he's cool with Rubio, but not Tulsi. What the F is Bernie Sanders? That's another thing. Bernie Sanders voted for Marco Rubio, but voted against Tulsi Gabbard. I don't understand. That doesn't make any sense to me. No sense whatsoever. Thank you, New York Varsity. The last time she did the morally right thing, she became blacklisted. So yeah, most of us will become opportunists. They even let Bloomberg in the debates with zero polling. They did. Another billionaire who just walked right in. And that's a perfect example of another billionaire who just walked right in. And thank you for this one, New York. Mitch McConnell is the human stain on the underwear of life. And GOP, if Biden is a vegetable, then what the heck do you call that? There you go. There you go. All right. If you're just joining, don't forget to smash that like button. Thank you very much. And we are moving on to our next story. Yeah, I think we'll be able to fit one more in before Scott gets here. This is very interesting. So the Democratic Party is in shambles. And when you look at their bench, they don't have many people on the bench that can help that turn that party around. They just don't. Some people have been mentioning Jon Stewart. I'm just like, another celebrity, like that type of thing. But now people are also mentioning Stephen A. Smith. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Stephen A. Smith. I am. If you watch sports like I do, you are familiar with Stephen A. Smith. I have watched him for years, cover sports on ESPN. So I know the sports Stephen A. Smith. But over the past year or so, Stephen A. Smith has decided to get involved in political discussions. And one of the things that he's been very vocal about is that the Democratic Party needs to do something. They need to step up or they're going to lose. He was very clear about that. Very clear about that early on, even before Kamala entered the race. And even after Kamala entered the race, he still said the Democratic Party is in trouble. Now, he eventually went on to vote for Kamala Harris. But after Kamala lost, Stephen A. Smith has been doing like this podcast tour. He's gone onto The View. He's been on PBD podcast. He's been on Bill Maher's show multiple times, basically venting a lot about the two-party system and in particular the Democratic Party and how they are losing people and they need to make some changes. Well, apparently a poll went out and that poll is asking who should run in 2028. And believe it or not, one of the people that was mentioned was Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith had some words for the Democratic Party again in this segment here titled, Maybe I Should Run. Let's go ahead and get into this.
What you have to do if you're the Democratic Party is be center thinking, as in center left. Prioritize the economy, prioritize national security, prioritize foreign relations, and forget all that other stuff. We got battles in this country that we have to fight. Why am I giving this advice? Because some of y'all have walked around trying to castigate people like me. Now, let me remind you of who the hell I am. Okay? I am a registered independent. Put that damn thing up on that screen, Griff, for me, please. reminding these people who the hell I am. Republican, Democrat, I don't like none of your asses. I'm talking about as a party, not as individuals. I don't like nary one of y'all. This two-party binary system sucks. It has contaminated our society in the United States of America. It has gotten our eyes off the ball. You know why? Because you have to agree with everything. Think about that for a second. Whatever workplace you are, whatever family you have, whatever boys or ladies you hang out with each other, y'all agree on everything? Everything. 100% aligned and you're thinking about everything. Of course you're not.
We'll pause here for a second. I want to interject. Yeah, Stephen A. Smith is an independent, but obviously he aligns more with the Democratic Party. Skylar says, is Stephen talking all of this on his ESPN show or his own thing? This is his podcast, but he's gone on to several other shows like The View and Bill Maher, etc., to talk about this. And I agree with him that both of those parties are just, you got to move in a different direction. And both of those parties are problematic. I agree with him about that. Some people don't like the fact that Stephen A. Smith yells a lot. I have a couple of friends of mine that are also into sports and they're like, I can't watch that guy because he yells too much. So I've heard that as well. But some people look at Stephen A. Smith and they say, he could be the Democratic Party's Donald Trump, like that his voice and his presence, because of the way that he presents himself, they think that maybe he could be that answer. Let's go on a little bit more.
But our system of government will have you thinking you have to be. All the Republicans vote with one another. All the Democrats vote with one another. Nobody has to do any freaking work. You don't even have to read the policies. All you have to do is ask your sister, how did the Republicans vote? Vote the opposite. How did the Democrats vote? Vote the opposite. That's all you have to do. That's why you got folks in the 80s still in office. And I'm not engaging in ageism here. I'm just speaking real. The hell you doing on Capitol Hill? You really think I believe you reading 400 or 500 pages of legislation? You think I believe you putting in that work? But you vote anyway, because you don't have to do any work. All you have to do is take the side that you're on and vote against the other side. That ain't serving our country. That's why the country pissed off. That's why they put somebody like Trump in office, because they sick and tired of the cesspool that is our nation's capital. And if you're the Democrats, you've got an opportunity to say that although Trump is different and he's apolitical, the dominance with which he's governing over his first 2 weeks on the job is antithetical and very detrimental to us as a nation. You can say that. And as a result, return to some level of normalcy. But what is that? You're the Democratic Party. Where's your voice? Who's your voice? Me calling you out about it has you thinking or has you acting like I'm the enemy. I'm trying to help.
And this is the question that a lot of people ask. FM said, why is he yelling? A lot of people ask this question. He talks like this on ESPN too. Yeah. And I think that's something that may turn some people off because some people don't want you to yell at them. Some people are just like, okay, tone it down. Like, you don't need to do all that, right? But some of the things that he's saying, I agree with. Like, I do think there should be term limits in Congress. I've told you guys this multiple times. I do think that obviously both of these parties, Trump kind of came in and changed the Republican Party, whereas no one did that on the Democrat side. No one came in and said, boom, we're getting. And by the way, Dean Phillips recently was on CNN, and Dean Phillips made a statement that when it comes to the Democratic Party and leadership, we don't want an AOC or the squad. So Dean Phillips is letting everybody know that the party is not moving in that direction, which is why I say that those people should be part of a separate party, because they're not going to move with you, right? But some people think that Stephen A. Smith may be the answer. We're going a little bit more here, and I want to tell you what he says about that poll.
I don't want to see you get your ass kicked in another election. I don't want to see you lose in the midterms. I don't want to see you lose 4 years from now in advance with J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or somebody being the next president of the United States just because they're opposite you. I want the best candidate for the country to win. That cannot happen. That can't happen. if you have no voice and you have no face for your party?
Okay, so again, that was him, and that's recent, by the way. That was him recently complaining again about the Democratic Party, and now he is responding to that poll result and how he feels about possibly running for president. And wait till I tell you what he says his conditions are.
But never in my wildest dreams did I believe that that would translate into me being polled as a presidential candidate for the United States of America. Now, I must tell you, there's quite a few things in life that could have easily shocked me, but it's never had. It's never done that. This is a shocker. I know y'all see me, Fox News one day, CNN the next, MSNBC the next, News Nation the next. You hear me on podcasts, Dave Rubin. You hear me on a radio show like Mark Levin. You see me on a television show like Sean Hannity's show or Chris Cuomo's show, Cuomo on News Nation. You see all of these things, and you hear me talking about politics. I've never considered it political talk. I consider it social commentary. When we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about healthcare, education, immigration, safety in the streets, I consider those to be life-altering issues that every American citizen has the right to feel passionate about, have fervor about, and express themselves about. So I simply looked at myself as doing my civic duty and speaking on these issues. And then lo and behold, some poll comes out, and the poll has me receiving 2% for the presidency of the United States of America. Tim Walz, former VP candidate for the Democratic Party under Kamala Harris, he got 3%. Josh Shapiro, governor for Pennsylvania, he's got some more percentage points. The only person that had double digits was Kamala Harris at 33%. Everybody else was single digits for the 2028 Democratic nomination for the president of the United States of America. And your boy's in the mix. Let me say this. I am flattered. I do totally consider myself unworthy of such a thing. I do understand that while I have surface knowledge of current event issues and what's going on in the world or whatever, I certainly don't have intimate knowledge. I've never covered Capitol Hill in my life. Hell, I've barely been on Capitol Hill.
And is that a disqualifier? And that part right there, he's never been on Capitol Hill. He's never covered Capitol Hill. Some people are asking for someone who does not have their foot in politics, someone who's not been a part of that DC swamp. Some people are asking for someone on the outside. This is why you keep hearing people mention someone like Jon Stewart, for example. People are bringing up different people that they think may be able to come in and shake the Democratic Party up. However, I do want to remind everyone that the president of the United States is also responsible for foreign policy. And you guys know how I feel about foreign policy. So my whole thing is, again, one of the things he admitted in another show was that he's not knowledgeable about what's really happening in Gaza. Okay, that's going to be a problem. You know, just stuff like that. Because the president of the United States is also the commander in chief. So you are over the military operations. And that's important. You do need to know these things. And I don't know. I felt like when he was going on this podcast tour to talk about politics and what the Democratic Party should do, I really did feel like, watch, they're going to ask him to run for something. I really did feel that was coming. And why would they ask him? Well, he's not a leftist. He's not a progressive. He's not a socialist. He's not a Marxist, but he's also not a conservative. He's a registered independent. So he agrees with the Democratic Party on the social issues. This is what he has said, by the way. He agrees with the Democratic Party on the social issues like racial justice, et cetera. But he agrees with the Republican Party on a lot of the economic issues, right? Like he said he's a capitalist. Like he believes in free market capitalism and he doesn't like high taxes, those types of things. But someone mentioned this in the chat, and I think this was a great thing that you brought up here, Miss Texas G. If Stephen A. Smith is an independent, why is he worried about how to better the Democratic Party? That part. Because this is the problem I take a lot of times when people say that they're independent. Hell, Roland Martin says he's an independent, but he tap dances for the Democratic Party, was literally standing next to Hillary Clinton asking her, do you know how to wobble? Do you know how to wobble? Let me teach you how to wobble. You do like this, you do like that. So we have to be wary of this, I'm an independent, but I'm trying to help the Democratic Party. Are you truly an independent? Just say you're a Democrat. Just say that. But he's seriously considering it. He's seriously considering it, but he does have requirements.
So I don't think it's deserved, but I will say this. It did give me cause to pause.
Of course.
And to think about something. Did y'all know that in order to be the president of the United States of America, in terms of the criteria, all you had to do was meet three standards of criteria?
Yes.
You got to be a United States citizen, born in the United States of America. You got to be at least 35 years of age. And you need to have lived in the United States for the last 14 years. That's it. And then I watch some of these people speak on these issues. Forgive me, I kind of think I can do a better job.
Oh,
I
boy.
just do. I mean, in terms of articulating my positions, my thoughts, my passions, I mean, I think I can pull that off.
Now it's going to his head. Now it's gets because being president is more about articulating your thoughts. It's more about having passion in your voice. Like you're literally commander in chief. And now it's going to his head, ladies and gentlemen. Now he's like, oh, I think I might be able to do this.
I'm just saying. Now, it just so happens that I live a pretty decent life. I think y'all all know that my salary is a little bit more than the president actually makes, along with congressional and Senate figures as well. So monetarily speaking, it's just not to my advantage to engage in politics on an official level because it would compromise my wallet. And I care about my wallet.
So you heard that part, right? He cares about his wallet. So this would be an issue for him. A couple of problems I think Stephen A. Smith would run into if he's serious about this, and please answer that poll in the live chat for me. I'm curious to see what you have to say. Is that number one of the criticism I think that Stephen A. Smith is going to receive is that he is single. Cory Booker received the same criticism. Again, I didn't make up these rules not to say that you have to be married to be president of the United States, but I think some people would hold that against him and they would say, well, you're single, but you date people. Are you going to be dating as the president? And how is that going to work out? That's one thing that I think is going to be an issue. The other problem is ESPN. Because the reality is Stephen A. Smith loves sports. He's been a sports commentator for years. And that means that he would have to leave all of that behind, right? He'd have to walk away from that completely to be president of the United States, right? But he's seriously thinking about it. But he has demands. He has demands. Let me show you what those demands are. And I hope you guys are ready to laugh. This is hilarious. ESPN host Stephen A. Smith says he would be U.S. president as long as he doesn't have to campaign. What? Like, I have never heard anything like this before. He'll do it as long as he doesn't have to campaign. ESPN personality Stephen A. Smith told CNBC Sports that he is not interested in campaigning, would be interested in being president. I'm telling you, we got to crack up on this show, man. This is too much. The First Take host said he thinks he would do well in a presidential debate. In a recent poll, 2% of voters said they would vote for Smith. I'm curious to see how the poll is going on this show. We'll get to the poll at the end so more people get a chance to answer. I'm curious to see how it is going. But Stephen A. Smith here said he would do it as long as he does not have to campaign. I wouldn't mind being in office. Yet the popular television host said it is the campaigning and being a politician that turns him off. I'm not one of those dudes that's great at shaking hands and kissing babies, per se, and currying favor with politicians and donors. I'm not a beggar. That's not who I am. So you heard it here first, folks. Stephen A. Smith says he is open to being president of the United States, but he does not want to campaign. He wants to run on his name. Oh my God. I don't even know what to say at this point. I really do think the Democratic Party is desperate. Desperate. Let's go to some of the comments here. Jesus Christ. Thank you, Justin B. I knew of Stephen A. Smith when he was drafted by the Miami Heat. That Stephen A. Smith? I didn't think he played for Miami. Maybe a different one. Terry Hinton says, no thanks to Forehead Smith. Oh my God. Why is everybody picking on his forehead? Why are you guys doing that? Everybody? Okay. Edsley says that's why Democrats will keep on losing. China said, can you please do a segment on Terry McMillan Waiting to Exhale movie and how it affected our community? And please do Dead Presidents as well. Yes, I can. I have a list of topics to do a deep dive into. Tomorrow night or Friday night, I am doing a deep dive into Hakeem Jeffries and who he really is. That one's going to be good. Don't miss that one. Thank you, Courtney. The louder Steve screams, the further his hairline goes back. Oh my God, you guys are brutal. Thank you, Miss Justice. First of all, Stephen A. Smith don't have a wife. Run to be a husband. You're almost 60. God. Oh, dear God. Sparky, Sabby, ask Scott, your fellow DOD school attendee, isn't it true he always dreamed of being a Stuttgart Stallion instead of a Kaiserslautern Raider? It's an interesting question. I can ask about that. Thank you, Carmen. Stephen A.'s hairline disqualifies him from any Jesus Christ. You guys are so bad. Thank you, New York Varsity. He is not that way because he is on camera. He is on camera because he is that way. Ooh. But the Dallas Cowboy fans will raise enough money to make sure he won't win. Thank you, Tim. I'm over it. Like Bernie doesn't take PAC money, blah, blah, blah. If you're not running third party, miss me. Now with a genocide, get the GTFO of the Uniparty. Thank you, Texas. Good thoughts, but you must have a real good appointed staff or you are a lame duck in DC. Press is a manager of all below them. Biden had terrible people in financial. Greg Bruce says he's very anti-weed. I heard that. Thanks, Tim. You care about your wallet, but not babies in Gaza. Thanks, Justin. LOL, Stephen A. Smith is another Jesse Ventura. I'll be president if I don't have to campaign. Justin B., I was wrong. It was a different Stephen Smith. I was about to say, yeah. Thanks, Danny. Stephen's hairline needs a two-state solution. You guys are brutal. Thanks, Dwayne. Are we sure Stephen A. isn't George Jefferson? Oh, my God. Thank you, Roger. Me and Steve go back, way back like his hairline. Oh, my God. Well, Stephen A. Smith, you probably don't want to. These are so bad. But who gets the last laugh in that situation, ladies and gentlemen? Who would get the last laugh? Does Stephen A. Smith get the last laugh? I have to go back to this one and then I'll go back to the other clips. Or does the Democratic Party get the last laugh? I don't know. Thank you, Hemp Car. Huffington Post said GMO soy turns mice. What? Testes from pink to blue. Reuters, the world's most evil company, Monsanto. The results of most studies with GM foods indicate that they may cause some common toxic effects, such as hepatic, pancreatic, renal, or reproductive effects and may alter the hematological, biochemical, and what's the last part? I can't see it. Immunologic perimeters. Interesting. Okay. I think Scott is here. So let's go ahead and Scott, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and bring you in. Just give me a thumbs up. All right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, my special guest is Scott Ritter. He is a former U.S. Marine Corps intelligence officer. He's also a former United Nations Special Commissions weapons inspector. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and bring him back. What's going on, Scott? Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. How are you doing?
We are doing great. We were just talking about Stephen A. Smith possibly running for president. So we're having a lot of jokes tonight. But we have quite a bit to discuss, Scott. I want to start with the recent announcement from Donald Trump, because right now, for those who are not aware, Donald Trump apparently has spoken with Vladimir Putin about ending the war in Ukraine. And it sounds like it's on the pathway to happening. I want to play this clip here. It was something that Trump said earlier today about NATO and Ukraine. Everybody check this out.
Yesterday were pretty accurate. I don't see any way that a country in Russia's position could allow them, just in their position, could allow them to join NATO. I don't see that happening. And long before President Putin, Russia was very strong on the fact that I believe that's the reason the war started, because Biden went out and said that they could join NATO, and he shouldn't have said that. As soon as he said that, I said, you know what? You're going to have a war now, and I was right about that. This is a war that would have never happened if I were president.
But you don't think it's President Biden's fault, not President Putin? I mean, he's the one.
I think Biden is incompetent, and I think when he said that they could join NATO, I thought that was a very stupid thing to say. I thought when he said, well, it depends if it's a minor incursion. In other words, it's okay if Russia does a minor incursion. I thought that was a very foolish thing to say. Yesterday were pretty.
Okay, Scott, that was one of the statements from Donald Trump earlier today. I want to get your take on this. He's talking with Vladimir Putin about possible peace talks. And apparently, from what I understand, Zelensky may not get anything, I guess, that he wants, if I'm understanding correctly. But the press they are describing this as though they said Donald Trump is surrendering to Vladimir Putin. I want to get your take on this.
Well, I don't understand how Donald Trump's surrendering to Vladimir Putin. The last I checked, Donald Trump ran on a platform of bringing this war to an end. I also think that you can't bring this war to end unless you approach this problem realistically. For those who think he's surrendered, what do you propose? I mean, I'm always curious for the people that are critical of Donald Trump. What do you propose? That Ukraine joins NATO? That's why the war started. Therefore, the war will continue, and Ukraine's losing badly. Not just Ukraine's losing badly, Europe's losing badly. NATO's losing badly. It's not as though Europe, NATO, and Ukraine are sitting there going, hey, we're still in the game. It's only a 2-point game, and we got like 10 minutes left. We're still in this game. Let's keep going. They're down 100 points, and there's like 2 minutes left in the game, and it's clear they're not going to pull this out. Trump's trying to save lives. I mean, that's the other thing. All the people that are critical, Trump's surrendering. Tell that to the Ukrainian mom whose child's going to live because this war ends soon, because otherwise the child just dies. Tell that to the people who live in Odessa right now in Kharkov, who want to be part of Ukraine. But if they continue with this war, Russia will take those territories and absorb them, and then they won't have anything. Tell that to every American out here who's alive today who won't be if this war goes south and becomes a nuclear war between Russia and NATO. So did Trump surrender? No. First of all, this isn't Trump's war. He hasn't lost anything. He's just trying to stop it. He's trying to bring it to an end. And he's doing it realistically. Look, he had a guy named Keith Kellogg. Everybody might be familiar with that name. He was the Ukraine special envoy. Keith Kellogg has been advising Trump on the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and much of Donald Trump's initial thinking on how this war would come to an end came from proposals floated by Keith Kellogg. But in the past 3 weeks, Keith's plan has been sort of leaked out to the press. And the Russians have said straight up, no, we're not doing this. And Trump knows he has one shot. You get to do this one time with Putin. And then if it doesn't work, Putin doesn't play, the repeating game. He'll just say, fine, we just complete the war without you. We don't care. So you get one shot to do this right. Keith Kellogg's plan was destroyed. So what happened? Kellogg was supposed to go to the Munich Security Conference and present his plan. I think this coming week. He headed there, and then Trump said, no, you're not presenting that plan. Why don't you go talk to the Europeans and NATO? And off he went, but he really didn't get that much of a conversation there either. Trump had his 90-minute call. Putin will not have that phone call unless he knows there's a chance of success. Putin doesn't entertain those calls, just like an American president would. You don't pick up a call from somebody desperate. You pick up a call after your staff has worked it out, what's going to be said, what you're going to talk about. And, so they had 90 minutes where they laid out the basics. Ukraine will never, ever, 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 ever be a member of NATO. It's just it. That's not surrendering. That's a Russian demand. And since Russia won the war, Russia gets to make that demand. Trump made it clear that United States troops will not be going into Ukraine. Zelensky is saying there has to be peacekeepers, European, but it won't work unless there's American troops, a significant number. And Trump went, no. And he said, and if Europe wants to do this, understand, we won't allow Article 5 protection. It won't be a NATO peacekeeping force. It'll be a European peacekeeping force. No European nation is going to put troops on the ground in Ukraine without Article 5 protection. So what he's saying is there won't be peacekeepers. And that's what the Russians have always said. There won't be peacekeepers. We can go on to military aid. Trump said, first of all, he's curtailing it. Then he said, what we will provide will be linked to Ukraine's ability to pay for it. He sent the Treasury Secretary over there to do a deal where Ukraine was supposed to sign away American access to the Ukraine's, rare earth metals. Zelensky didn't do the deal, which means Zelensky gets no weapons from the United States. Puts all the pressure on Europe, and Europe can't do this, can't afford it. This isn't surrender. This is reality. This is the reality of the situation. Trump is trying to bring this conflict to an end in a way that's best for Russia, believe it or not, for Ukraine, for Europe, and for the United States. The only thing he's surrendering to is reality. And God bless him for doing it, because we had 4 years of a president just playing stupid games that ended up killing hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. The fact that Trump has said no to NATO, this was what the Russians said from the very beginning. They said, just Ukraine can't be a member of NATO. And Biden said, no, you can't, you're not allowed to dictate. Russia, we're not dictate. We're just telling you it isn't going to happen ever. And the war was because of that. NATO's admitted it. Stoltenberg and now Rutte have said, this is because of NATO expansion. That's what this war was all about. And Trump just said, no, they're never going to join. If Ukraine had accepted this reality back in March of 2022, the war would have ended, because there was a negotiated peace deal between Ukraine and Russia. But Boris Johnson flew in and put the kibosh on that. And as a result now, Ukraine has lost hundreds of thousands of additional dead, 20% of their territory, and they've lost this war. It all could have been prevented simply by saying the obvious. Ukraine will never, ever, ever, ever be a member of NATO.
And this was agreed upon after the fall of the Berlin Wall, that NATO was not supposed to expand, at least further to Russia, towards Russia. It was not
1 inch eastward. Not 1 inch eastward was the exact quote from James Baker to Mikhail Gorbachev, repeated over and over again by every foreign minister. People said it wasn't in writing. Now it turns out to have been in writing. And they just tried to deny it, and now it's just painfully obvious. I mean, James Baker came back and reported to the National Security Council of George Herbert Walker Bush and said, yeah, I told Gorbachev not 1 inch eastward. And they went, not so fast. We think actually there's going to be a lot inches eastward. And then we lied to, Bill Clinton lied to Boris Yeltsin, then expanded it anyways against the objections. And that's what Trump said. He said, this isn't Putin, making outrageous. He said, Russia has been against this from day one. And it's true. It's about Russian national security interests. And the interesting thing about Trump, we We can mock him all we want, and there's a lot to mock sometimes. But John F. Kennedy, one of the classic speeches of the modern era was the speech he made to American University in June of 1963, where he talked about the potential of peace with Russia. And one of the things that John F. Kennedy said in that speech, and it's quoted all the time, is the absolute need to get into the shoes of the other side, not because you're surrendering, but because you have to see things from their perspective, to understand where they're coming from. And my God, because JFK said it, oh my, we all bow at it, as we should. It's a brilliant speech. Donald Trump, in his Donald Trumpian way, just said the same thing. He said, it's just from the Russian perspective, it's just not going to happen. But now that's called surrender. If JFK had done it, of course, he would have done it more eloquently. But, people would have said, my God, what a genius diplomat this man is. But it's Donald Trump, so it's surrender. No, Donald Trump is applying JFK type thinking to solve this problem. He just does it in a New York City realtor fashion, which isn't as smooth as, Hyannisport.
This is a good point. And another thing, too, I do want to mention this. He mentioned about Russia and the future of the G7, which used to be the G8. Everyone listen to this.
Do you want to have Russia back to the G7, sir?
I'd love to have him back. I think it was a mistake to throw him out. Look, it's not a question of liking Russia or not liking Russia. It was the G8. And, I said, what are you doing? You guys, all you talk about is Russia, and they should be sitting at the table. I think Putin would love to be back. Obama and a couple of other people made a mistake and they got Russia out. It's very possible that if that was the G8, you wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. And if I was president, you definitely wouldn't have had the problem with Ukraine. Russia would have never attacked Ukraine. But
so that's an interesting point there. He's bringing up that he's interested in bringing Russia back to what used to be the G8 and it's now the G7 because Russia was removed from that. But to bring them back, it sounds like he is more willing to want to work with Russia in some way, shape, or form, whereas Biden and Kamala did not want to work with Russia. And I think it's just, something Professor Wolf said when I talked to him a while back. He said that the United States government is going to have to be willing to work with other countries like China and like Russia, because number one, there's the economic factors, right? Like China's economy is booming. And I mean, you look at Russia, like their economy was able to withstand the sanctions that the US government put on them. And it's only inevitable that at some point it's like we're trying to smother these countries when instead we should be trying to find a way to work with them.
The Biden administration, if you go back and look at their national security strategy document, which was promulgated early on in the Biden administration, first they did a draft presidential guidance, and then they later on but it made it clear the defining characteristic of America's, national security needs were the rules-based international order. They straight up said it. And this is the system of organizations and, agreements that were put out there, the world, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, NATO, everything that has nothing to do with the United Nations in the rule of law, but everything to do with America writing the rules and creating institutions to ensure American hegemony over the world. Initially to contain Russia as part of the Cold War strategy of containment, but then once contain the Soviet Union, once the Soviet Union collapsed, to fill that vacuum and control the world, literally about American hegemony. And the Biden administration set that down, said that's what defines us. That's the role. In order for that to happen, you have to have an adversary. I want to remind people that the rules-based international order was created during the Cold War in order to justify America's absolute control over everything. You needed an adversary that could justify that. When the Soviet Union went away and collapsed, we had to create a new adversary. And what we did is we recreated Russia as the enemy. Russia's not the enemy of anybody. I'm just here to tell you guys, I've been studying Russia my entire life. And while they're not perfect, and while there's things that we could always seek to do better, they are not our enemy. They're not trying to invade us. They're not trying to dominate the world. There is no Russian equivalent of the rules-based international order out there. We have manufactured an enemy, and we use Russophobia, the irrational fear of Russia, to dumb people down. We don't let Americans, we don't like Americans to travel to Russia. If you do, the FBI comes and visits you because they don't want you to know the truth about Russia. If Tucker Carlson goes there and comes back and tells you about the Moscow subway and how clean Russia is, it's Russian propaganda. You can't believe any of that. We just make things up about Russia. What we're finding out is that the United States government has actually paid independent journalists around the world to spread lies about Russia. Why? Because we need an enemy to justify continuing the rules-based international order. And that's what's happened here. Obama, tried the reset. I mean, it was the biggest joke in the world, conceived by Michael McFaul, who sells himself as a Russia expert, but what he's an expert in is the exploitation of the defeated Russia. He's a guy that went in there in the 90s. He was one of the people that, backed Boris Yeltsin. And everybody's like, well, what's wrong with backing Boris Yeltsin? Wasn't he sort of the Democratic leader? No, Boris Yeltsin was a brutal dictator. Democratic leaders don't put tanks in the street to fire on the parliament because the parliament disagrees with their policies. In October of 1993, Boris Yeltsin put tanks in the streets, assaulted the parliament, slaughtered parliamentarians because he's a believer in democracy? No, because he's a brutal dictator. And the United States backed him. Don't believe me. The deputy, the charge d'affaires at the embassy in Moscow, American charge d'affaires, wrote a memorandum. It's called the Second Long Memorandum, sort of a takeoff of George Kennan's original 1946 long memorandum, which created the conditions for containment. But this one talks about how America actually destroyed Russia's ability to create legitimate democratic institutions by backing Yeltsin. We bought a president. We bought a Russian president. We paid for an election, 1996. We got him reelected. We orchestrated this thing. We destroyed all potential for legitimate democratic institutions. And this was what Michael McFaul did. And so now Michael McFaul is in the business of destroying and suppressing Russian democracy. And he's Obama's number one advisor on Russia. And he says, let's have a reset. But the reset, I just want to remind people, because this is important. The reset was never about creating the conditions for American-Russian friendship. The reset was about keeping Vladimir Putin out of the presidency. You remember there was a time when he swapped with Dmitry Medvedev, and Putin became prime minister, and Medvedev became the president. The reset was supposed to empower Medvedev to stay in the presidency and keep Putin out of politics. Joe Biden actually went to Moscow in 2011, I believe, and held a meeting with the Russian opposition saying it would be a bad thing for Russia and Putin if he ran again. Could you imagine a Russian leader coming to America and saying it would be a bad thing? Meeting with the Republicans, it would be a bad thing if Kamala Harris ran for president. I mean, as a Republican, you're like, well, we think it's a bad thing, but it's none of your business. This is America. This is our election. How dare you come in? But Biden went in there and did this, trying to keep Putin out. The reset was all about manipulating Russian politics, interfering with Russia. Russia kicked USAID out of Russia in 2012. And at the time, we're like, oh, my God, look, they are destroying legitimate people trying to build democracy. Well, we now know the truth of USAID. It's a regime change operation. It was a regime change operation in 2012. That's why the Russians kicked it out. And now we're seeing the truth about it. We have been setting Russia up to be this boogeyman from the very beginning because we don't want Russia to stand on its own 2 feet. We don't want a Russian leader who says, we're not going to bend the knee to the United States of America like Boris Yeltsin did. And for that reason, we have to get rid of them. We have to oppose them. And so we create the conditions for this conflict. Donald Trump's coming in and saying, I'm not playing that game anymore. That's where we're at.
Scott, this goes all the way back to, are you familiar with the Wolfowitz doctrine?
Oh, yeah. Me and Paul go way back.
So for those who are not aware, the Wolfowitz doctrine is a doctrine that basically said that no other global power could be, I guess, larger than the United States. That the United States, that no
global power or collection of powers.
Right.
We couldn't even allow. We can't allow an alliance. We have to be more powerful than any single nation or collection of nations. We have to be the dominant power in the world.
Yeah, a lot of people are not aware of that or familiar with it, and that just reminds me a lot when we talk about Russia, we talk about China, all these other countries that the U.S. is heavily criticizing. Again, if you guys talk to people that have been to those countries, like Danny Haiphong, I know a lot of you watch Danny Haiphong. Danny Haiphong goes to China. He's been multiple times. He has videos of him in China. Does it look like it's what our government is telling you it is? Same thing. Some of you were watching the interview with Tucker Carlson when he interviewed Vladimir Putin. And he was like, look at what we see in Russia. And he was talking about the subway. He was talking about the food. He took you into the grocery store. They have better food than we do. Does it look like what the government was telling you about Russia? This is why I feel like it's like their goal is to brainwash you for you to think negatively about those countries. So you never even, and think about visiting those countries. Oh God, no, I would never want to go there. They're horrible. They're this, they're that. And so it reminds me of the Wolfowitz doctrine because again, like these countries, they are powerful countries. Like we got to understand, I said this before, that the US government, like we are in decline. We went up, and I feel like we hit our peak and that we are in a decline phase. Now, what do they say? Every empire eventually falls. And there are other countries. You see this. China is growing economically. Russia's growing economically. And it's like our government has been trying to find ways to stop these other countries from doing well economically.
Well, again, we don't know how to operate in a world where we are just another major power, because that's the reality of the United States. And look, we're a powerful nation. There's no doubt about that. We may even be at this point in time the most powerful nation in the world. But as you pointed out, the numbers are conspiring against us. Most very powerful, healthy economies don't have a $36 trillion debt that's going to balloon to 54 before you know it. Most countries that have a healthy relationship with the world don't have to rely upon $1 trillion defense budget to prop it up around the world. I mean, if we got along with the world, we wouldn't have to have, the ability to kick the world's butt. This is just the facts. We are a nation that is very much on a downward trajectory. I'd like to believe that we can find our rightful place and level out, and that we can be, one of the major players in the world today, where you sit around the table and we're at that table. And when we speak, it's like E.F. Hutton, people listen. But see, we're used to, we could talk about King Arthur in the round table, but we have to be King Arthur. You see, we have to be in charge. We won't tolerate anything other than that. Whereas, we can't accept the fact that we just might be Lancelot, powerful, cool guy, but we ain't King Arthur anymore. And maybe there isn't a King Arthur. Maybe there's just a bunch of Knights of the Round Table that get together in the big three, sit there we could be the big three, but we're not King Arthur anymore. And that's a reality that most Americans can't handle. I mean, most Americans are so, chest thumping, USA, 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 but they do it out of ignorance. They don't even know what makes us great, what makes us powerful, what makes us influential anymore. We need to adjust. And I think what you're seeing with Trump is this adjustment. I mean, look at what he's doing with Europe, because this isn't just about a surrender to Russia, what they call it. This is recognizing Russia's rightful place in the world. Russia's not seeking to invade Europe. They can't invade Europe. Just so people understand that, they don't have the military capacity to invade Europe. They've got 900,000 men fighting a winning effort against Ukraine. But now if you want to go on into NATO, you're fighting a front that goes from Finland all the way down to Romania and everything in between. You're going to need, 2.7, 3.2 million men to fight that war.
And it seems
Russia
like,
doesn't have that.
yeah, it seems like I want to show people this because this is another thing. A lot of things were said today. So guys, please brace yourselves. This is another thing that Donald Trump said about holding a summit with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. Like, I swear to God, this is like a totally different government right now with foreign. Listen to this, guys.
See one giant summit with you, Xi Jinping, and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I could see that. Let things calm down a little bit. You know, when I left, we had no Middle East problem. We had no Russia going into Ukraine. They never would have done it. Putin never would have done it. And I came back and we got like the whole world is blowing up. So when we straighten it all out, then I want to have one of the first meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China, President Putin of Russia. And I want to say, let's cut our military budget in half. And we can do that. And I think we'll be able to do it.
See one giant.
That sent shockwaves around the internet, by the way. I want to get your take about that. Because again, like, you know, I'm a lefty. Of course, I don't agree with a lot of like Trump's policies.
Yeah, I get it.
But I 100% agree with
Sabby, be careful. Your followers are going to say, you've drank the Kool-Aid. You've bought into Trump. MAGA's got you. MAGA owns you now. Sabby, no, Trump's saying the smartest damn thing a president said in a long time. You morons out there, you Trump haters, get the hell out of my life. This man's talking about doing things that should have been done a long time ago, creating the condition to cut $1 trillion defense budget in half. That means instead of spending $1 trillion building weapons that will destroy the world, we're only spending $500 billion. That's still a lot of money, guys. That's, we need to cut even further. And no to nuclear war. You got, again, Sabby, I don't mean to be overly dramatic here, but all the morons who are out there criticizing you and me and everybody else who go, well, that's innovative thinking. We all almost died this fall. The history will be written someday about how close Joe Biden brought us to a nuclear war with Russia. In November, Joe Biden willfully violated the red line set by the Russians in their nuclear doctrine that would have allowed them to use nuclear weapons. We did it willfully. And when this was briefed to Congress, what scared the congressman that I talked to who received the briefing was not just that the finding out that the Russians weren't bluffing, because there's a lot of people saying, well, the Russians are just bluffing. The CIA came and said, no, they're not bluffing. They're really going to go to nuclear war over this. They said that's not what bothered them. What bothered them was the Biden administration saying, we're ready. Don't you remember the briefing that was given by the planning officer of Strategic Command to a think tank in Washington, D.C. at that same time, where he said, no, we're ready for a nuclear exchange with Russia. A nuclear exchange, guys, that means cities will be blown off the map. That means tens of millions, if not more, people will die. And we were this freaking close. We were closer to a nuclear war at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so, for all you Trump haters out there, if the only thing Donald Trump did is say, I want to stop a nuclear war, I'm all on board, because a nuclear war is what can kill us all. Everything else is problematic. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, he isn't a friend of Israel. I know that's a problem for a lot of people, although we can get into that because I think he just pulled a big one on Israel. But again, all you Trump haters will never give him credit for that.
Well, let's get to that in just a second. I wanted to ask you one more thing about Russia first before we move over to Israel, because I 100% agree. And I think most lefties would agree with cutting the military budget. I think a lot of us have been calling for that for quite some time. So I 100% agree with that. What do you say, Scott, to people who say that, but Russia was still wrong to invade, to go into Ukraine?
I'd say you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're ignorant as dirt. You don't know anything about Russia. And you don't know anything about Ukraine. Because to say that proves you know nothing. Because I will ask you about Stepan Bandera. You'll say, well, that's in the 1940s. Then I'll ask you about the CIA operation that kept the Banderas relevant up until 1990, when we paid the Banderists to disrupt Russia from 1948 to 1990. Did you know that? No, you ignorant, stupid punks. Do you know that right down the road from me, 60 miles away in the town of Ellettville, New York, is a Banderas Nazi camp? Every summer, they run 3 iterations of Ukrainian American youth through who wear the brown frickin' uniforms of Stepan Bandera, carry his portrait in a torchlight parade where they sing songs glorifying the slaughter of Poles at the Volyn massacre. You didn't know that, did you? You idiots. I get so mad at these people. You did know that the CIA has been funding regime change operations in Ukraine to empower these nationalists. I'm not talking about 2014, which most of you might have some vague, but if I said, the Orange Revolution, 2004, 2005, you do know that a guy named Viktor Yanukovych won that election. And then we came in, interfered, so they did a rerun. He won that too. Constitutionally, he must be the president, but that wasn't the outcome we wanted. So we ousted him, put in a nationalist. You know what the first thing that nationalist president did, Yushchenko? He made Stepan Bandera a national hero of Ukraine. That's like saying Adolf Hitler is the national hero of Germany. Yep. That's how bad it is, you morons, you idiots. God, I despise you because you sit there and pretend that Ukraine is the innocent party here. They are not the innocent party. The United States has been manipulating Ukraine to be a thorn in the side of the Soviet Union and now Russia. And then what happened, though, is in 2010, Viktor Yanukovych, who was supposed to be pushed aside, came back and he won an election. Oh, my God, the pro-Russian guy won an election. And we couldn't stand that. So then 2014 comes along, Maidan, CIA, Victoria Nuland, cookies, violence. We now know that it was the Banderas funded by us who went up and shot the cops and shot the protesters and tried to blame it on the police who weren't shooting the protesters. It was the Banderas who murdered them to create a perception to overthrow Viktor Yanukovych, but they couldn't handle that because they got rid of Viktor Yanukovych once before. Now they had to finish the job, which meant to get rid of all the Russians in Ukraine. You guys don't know that, do you? You don't know what they did. You don't know what they did in Odessa, where they burned 48 Russians to death. You got this stupid Ukrainian parliamentarian running around and everybody, he's his little darling. He kicked the bodies of the Russians who jumped out of the burning building to make sure they were dead. He's a Banderist scum. They all are. Then they tried to move on Crimea, but the Russians wouldn't let them because Crimea is primarily Russian population. And the little green men came in and they said Crimea belongs to Russia. Then they moved on Mariupol. Do you want to know why they call it the rape of Mariupol? Because the Azov people came in there and literally raped Mariupol, raped the Russian women, murdered the Russian men, seized control of the city, and created it to become the headquarters of the new Nazi regime. When the Russians retook Mariupol in 2022, they found the headquarters, Nazi memorabilia, the everything, all of it. That's what they are. They're Nazis. And Zelensky, Mr. Peace-loving Zelensky, ran on a platform of peace. He had just become president when he held a war council. There's a video where he's telling his cabinet members, I am going to war against Russia. I am going to war in the Donbass. I am going to finish this anti-terrorist organization, because that's what he called the Russians who rose up and said, we're not willing to be kicked out. No, Russia didn't. Russia, in 2015, Russia had the Ukrainian army surrounded in a little town, Debaltseve or whatever in Donetsk. And if Russia wanted to, they could have killed them all because they had them surrounded. And the Germans and the French, Poroshenko, the Ukrainian president, called up the Germans and the French and pleaded, please, 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 don't let Mr. Putin kill us all. So the Germans and the French went to Putin and said, could you please just have peace? And for all you people out there saying Russia wanted Ukraine the whole time, Putin said, sure, but we need an agreement that will make sure that Ukraine's borders are respected, but you can't be killing the Russians. You have to respect linguistic, cultural, religious heritage, and it has to be in the Constitution. It's called the Minsk Agreements. There was Minsk 1, and then because the Ukrainians wouldn't do it, Minsk 2. And this was Putin's way. He wasn't looking for territory. He just wanted to protect the Russians, to make sure that they weren't butchered by the Nazis. And what did NATO do? Well, we now know. Poroshenko, Merkel, and Francois Hollande, who was president of France at the time, have all admitted that Minsk was a sham. They lied. It wasn't about peace. They were never going to implement it. Minsk was to buy time so NATO could rebuild the Ukrainian army so that it could go to war with Russia. Don't believe me? Look at the slides prepared by the United States Army, who built the training camp in Western Ukraine in 2015 and bragged that every 55 days they train a battalion of 800 Ukrainians here in the West. So they draw an arrow so they can go here to fight the Russians. And we've been doing that since 2015. And we built the army up, and the Ukrainians were getting ready to go in and assault the Donbass when the Russians said enough of this. They tried to warn the United States. They had a meeting with Biden in Geneva in June of 2021, where Putin said, all you have to do is get Ukraine to agree to Minsk. If they agree to Minsk, all this problem's solved. It's done. And Biden promised, he said, Tony Blinken will take care of this. Well, that was in June. In September, Tony Blinken was cutting the secret deals. He's now admitted it. Secret deals sending Javelin missiles and Stinger missiles to Ukraine. When he was supposed to be implementing Minsk, he was preparing for the war. Tony Blinken, was preparing for war. The Russians found out about it, confronted the French and the Germans in October of 2021 and said, okay, one last chance. Are you going to do Minsk or not? And they said no. And the Russians said, okay, no more Minsk. But before they invaded, because they didn't want to invade, they came out in December 17th. They put out a peace treaty. They put out a treaty to NATO and to the United States and said, let's talk about this. All we need you to agree to is that Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. And then this problem goes away. We wouldn't agree to that. The Russians tried negotiating directly with the Ukrainians in the lead up to the Russian incursion. Ukraine admits the Ukrainians are laughing about it. We led the Russians on. We led them on, and right to the very end, we led them to believe there was an agreement. There wasn't. So Russia went in. Everybody's like, oh, the Ukrainians kicked the Russians' ass. It didn't happen, guys. Russia slaughtered the Ukrainians, but the purpose of Russia was never to take Kiev or do anything other than to get Ukraine to the negotiating table. 6 days after Russia went into Ukraine and was slaughtering the Ukrainian army. They resisted, by the way. The Russians did take casualties. I'm not denying that. The Ukrainians went. They started the peace negotiations in Gomel. They had 3 rounds of negotiations in Gomel before they moved to Turkey in March. And by the end of March, they had a completed peace treaty ready to go. The Istanbul Communique, initialed by all the parties. The Ukrainians were actually getting ready to pop the cork and celebrate the end of the war on very favorable terms, by the way, to the Ukrainians, when Boris Johnson flew in and said, nah, it's done. You can't accept this. The United States made the phone call. Boris is right. You can't accept this. And so the Ukrainians turned down the Istanbul Communique and the war began. So for all you morons out there who say Russia invaded, Russia started, you don't know what you're talking about. You are literally dumber than dirt, and you don't deserve to be at the table talking this topic, because all you do is get in the way. Your ignorance gets in the way. And I'm sick and tired of it, because your ignorance has created the conditions that have resulted in over 1 million Ukrainian dead. All you idiots that put the little Ukrainian flag on your social media, we care about Ukraine. 1 million Ukrainian dead, and the numbers are going to be worse than that, people. When the final bodies are counted, when the final tally is done, you're going to find out it's going to be a much higher toll than that, because Ukrainians are abandoning their dead on the battlefield. They're not accounting for their dead. They're lying about their casualties. The West knows the truth. And it's your fault. It's all the ignorant people out there who say, I'm with Ukraine. Why would you be with Ukraine? They're not the good guys here. They've been the bad guys from day one.
Well, they don't. Well, a lot of people, most people don't know, though, Scott. Most people don't know.
Ignorance isn't an excuse, is it?
No, but just remember how a lot of us were misled about the war in Iraq, too. Just remember how a lot of us were misled about that. So, I always try to keep that in mind. That, like,
well, right. I do that. Except you remember where I was on that. I was out there educating people, and I travel around the country and I travel around the world. I briefed the United States Senate. I briefed the United States Congress. I was on every TV network possible. I was speaking at every university possible. I went to brief NATO. I went to the European Parliament. I went to the Japanese Parliament, the French Parliament, the British Parliament, the Italian Parliament. I went everywhere. I talked till I was blue in the face, telling everybody that there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So you can't sit there and say, well, we didn't know. No, you opted not to know. You opted not to know. You opted not to believe me. You opted to believe the government. That's it. I mean, I'm just saying, I was there trying to tell the truth about it, because I was the chief weapons inspector in Iraq. If there was one person in the world who knew that Iraq had been disarmed, it's the guy who did it and had the receipts. So, I get what you're saying. So I'm just saying that's a little personal for me because, I put everything on the line to try and stop that war and try to tell the truth to the American people in the world about the real status of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction programs. And so when people say, well, we didn't know, I'm going to say, well, you opted not to know because the truth was there. It was really there. But, again, I have my best friends. I mean, guys I love to death. We would go play, we'd go watch. We're getting a little old to play football, but we'd go to Monday Night Football. And we'd sit there and have the conversation. And I'd be a little bit on them. I'm like, why aren't you guys getting all fired up about this? You're going to be, well, come on, Scott. What do you want from us, man? This is your job. You do it 24 hours a day. We have real jobs. We have real jobs. We have to go do our real jobs, real estate, and we have to do, financial management. And we work our butts off during the day. And when we come home at night, we're sort of tired. We got real wives and real children and real lives, and we don't have time to do all this. And I'm like, okay, I mean, I sort of have sympathy for you. I'm there. But then we're watching the game, and they all run fantasy football leagues. They're all in there. And they're sitting there, my God, what a horrible play. The statistics show that if you had run through the 2-3 gap with the you would have gotten 5 yards. And I'm like, how the hell do you know all that? Oh, well, we buy these books and all this stuff. So you have time to learn about football, but you don't have time to learn about the thing that's going to get us into a war that's going to change the entire. It's all a matter of priorities, Sabby. It's all about priorities. And most Americans, to be honest, don't set peace as their priority. They give lip service to it, but they don't set it as their priority. They do other things.
That sounds like something my parents would have said, like when I was in high school. They would say, so you're telling me you had time?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I ran out of time. Really?
So that brings me to Israel. And we got to bring in this piece here. There's been a lot of talk about Donald Trump's statement here. We're going to start it with this.
In the meantime, I would own this. Think of it as a real estate development for the future. It would be a beautiful piece of land.
Would the Palestinians have the right to return?
No, they wouldn't, because they're going to have much better housing.
President Donald Trump, not only in.
And of course, obviously, Anna's mad about that. But the part there about that right to return, a lot of us are really, really upset about that. We think, obviously, the Palestinian people should not be displaced from their land and their home. What is Donald Trump doing here?
No, he's done it. It's not doing it. Just so you know, the first big interview I gave, I think it was with George Galloway on the mother of all talk shows. After this, I said what I'm going to say now. If you think for 1 second that what Donald Trump put out there is a real plan, that he's going to displace people, none of that was ever going to happen. None of that was. What he was doing was twofold. One, what name did he mention when he first gave that presentation with Bibi Netanyahu white gripping the podium and staring at him like he's crazy? You remember that? Bibi sitting there going, what the hell's going on? Because it took him by surprise. Never once did he say Israel has a role in Gaza's future. What he said is, I am in charge. America will own it. And we're going to kick all them Palestinians out and create something new. And the world's going to be in there, not Israel. And Israel's going, wait a minute, that's our land. That's our thing. What Trump did is tell Israel, you've created a problem. You're done. For all the people out there, all the Trump haters, and there's many of you out there who say, my God, he surrounded himself with so many Zionists. So many Zionists. Of course he did. Yes, he did. Yes, he did. And he won the election. All right. Clever man. He won the election because sort of had the Zionists, placated. Ask Elise Stefanik what role she played in Trump's little presentation before none. She's a big Zionist. People hated that Elise Stefanik was going to be the United Nations ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Michael Huckabee, that good Christian Zionist, insane man, by the way. I despise him. Going to be the ambassador to Israel. What role did he play? Not a damn thing. Marco Rubio, taken totally by surprise, Mr. Zionist. Not a single one of the Zionists that everybody hates was in on that. Why? Because Trump doesn't care about them. I said this from the beginning. Donald Trump will do what Donald Trump wants to do when Donald Trump wants to do it. And the first thing Donald Trump said is, I want peace in the Middle East. You can't have peace in the Middle East if you continue the failed practices of the past. If you went back and said, okay, the first thing we're going to do is get UNRWA back up and running and start pouring billions of dollars of aid into the United Nations that will then continue the permanent concentration camp status of the people of Gaza. If that's your plan, you have no plan, because that just brings you back to square one. Because then Israel says, well, we have to bring in Kogat. All you haters out there know what Kogat is, right? You've done that. You've done your research. That's that Israeli occupation force that oversees all the aid and runs everything. Even though Gaza is supposed to be free and independent, the Israelis run everything through Kogat. Kogat's not there right now, and they're not coming back because Donald Trump reset the paradigm. Now, he put forward ridiculous things. Why did he do this, you'll say? To get Sabby mad? Well, it worked. To get me mad? Got me furious. Got a lot of people furious. But he doesn't care. The people he was worked on were President Sisi of Egypt and King Abdullah of Jordan. You see, those two neighbors of Palestine who don't give a damn about the Palestinians, backed up by the Saudi Arabians who don't give a damn about the Palestinians, who have forever spoken about how they care, but they don't care. They've abandoned them. They've never committed to them. They won't commit to them. They're scared to death of them. And did you see the press conference with King Abdullah?
Yes, awful. But he agreed. But he said he agreed to take in 2,000
kids. That was a panic mode. But even that, he thought he was going to die when he lands in Amman because he can't do this. He can't betray the Palestinian people. He needs something. Sisi was supposed to have a phone call with Trump, and he canceled it. And here's the ringer, guys. This is the great thing. Sisi immediately did what Donald Trump was trying to get from those Arabs, a counter proposal. Sisi came in and said, no. You don't displace the Palestinians. He did what no Egyptian leader has done. Egypt is going to come in and rebuild Gaza. Saudi Arabia is going to pay for it, and the Palestinian people get to stay there. We have a plan, a phased-in plan. That never would have happened, all you Trump haters, had Trump not come in with this most ridiculous plan in the world. And Marco Rubio just today came out and certified everything I'm saying is fact. He said Donald Trump was waiting for the Arabs to come up with a counter proposal, and they did. And now it's on the table, and the negotiations begin, and I think we have something here. What we have here is a totally different way of viewing how to solve the Gaza problem. Is it going to work? I don't know. Is it perfect? I don't know. But what I do know is if you're sitting there saying you support the Palestinians and you believe in a free and independent Palestine, but you were willing to go back and reset the same failed system that failed them time and time again over 50 years, then you don't care about the Palestinian people. Maybe the only person who does care about the Palestinian people is the guy who said that he was going to forcefully displace them, knowing that that wasn't going to happen, and compelling the Egyptians to commit to the rebuilding of Gaza in a way that Egypt has never done before. Donald Trump just plays a different game, guys. It's not about me smoking Donald Trump's weed and getting my mind polluted. He's playing a completely different game, one that maybe most of you just don't understand. Well, it just happened. He put out a proposal that was so ridiculous, so absurd, impossible to implement. I told people that. He's going to forcefully displace the Palestinians with what? American troops. Really? How many American troops do you think would be needed to do that? I know how many. Do you? It's 100,000. But when you talk about 100,000 American troops, you don't put in 100,000 because you have to have 100,000 more ready to rotate in to replace them in 6 months. And you have to have 100,000 more in the training pipeline. That's 300,000 American troops in the U.S. military that can't sustain that. We're overstretched in Europe. We're trying to redistribute forces in the Pacific. Donald Trump committed to a plan that requires 300,000 troops up front plus another 60,000 to manage the logistics. That's a third of the American military. Isn't going to happen, was never going to happen. But he used that to squeeze the Egyptians and squeeze the Jordanians and squeeze the Saudis. And it worked because now there's a counter proposal there. And Marco Rubio's talking about it, saying that's the plan. That's what's going to happen.
So you're saying this basically pushed or forced the other Arab nations to stand up and act?
Of course it did. Because he was telling the Egyptians, we're cutting off all aid unless you accept the Palestinians.
But Scott, I looked at the recent data, and even conservatives aren't happy about this.
Happy about what?
They're not happy about this plan that Donald Trump has with Gaza.
There is no plan. I just told you there is no plan. It's never going to be implemented. He just are they happy about the Egyptians saying they're going to come in, take Saudi money to rebuild it? Or do they not talk about that? Are they only focused on Donald Trump using American troops to forcefully relocate the Palestinians? Because that was never a plan. Never a plan. It was Donald Trump saying something to provoke the Arabs into putting a counter proposal on the table. And we now have a counter proposal on the table. And if you're unhappy with that, then I say you don't care about the Palestinians. Because now we have Arabs saying that they're going to rebuild Gaza and the Palestinians aren't going to be relocated. And it's going to be done in a way that the Israelis no longer have their footprint on Gaza. I mean, it's changing the paradigm, guys. I mean, it hasn't solved all the problems, but what it's done is not get us trapped into the failed practices of the past.
I get what you're saying. I just don't see Israel allowing that to happen.
They have no choice. This is what people don't understand. Donald Trump sent his Middle East envoy to Israel about a ceasefire that Netanyahu said, I'm never going to accept. And the envoy said, sit down and shut up. People not understand who's the boss here. I know you're all out there thinking that Benjamin Netanyahu's the boss. He's not. Israel will not exist without the United States. It doesn't work the other way around. Israel will not exist without us. They need us. And Donald Trump is a president who's willing to pull those levers. And he told Netanyahu to sit down and shut up and accept a ceasefire that caused his government to almost collapse. Ben Gvir withdrew in protest, almost brought the whole thing down, still laboring to try and keep it together. And now you had a situation where Israel is threatening to pull out on Saturday. That ain't happening because Donald Trump's not going to let it happen. There is one boss in the Middle East right now, and his name is Donald Trump. And Israel knows that. Benjamin Netanyahu sat there white gripping a podium as Trump humiliated him in front of the world by saying, you don't have a say in anything we do in Gaza. And if you think for a second Netanyahu is going to go against Trump, you don't know Donald Trump.
Well, this reminds me of something Colonel Larry Wilkerson said to me recently. He said, which I have to correct the way that I say it. I've been saying that Israel owns the United States, and Colonel Larry Wilkerson said, no, the U.S. owns Israel. And so it reminds me of when Joe Biden said, if there wasn't an Israel, we would have created one. So that kind of tells you, again, when you're talking.
It's a complicated relationship. It's not a black and white relationship. When you have the Israelis putting $100 million to buy an American election, which they bragged about, it was AIPAC. But, what is AIPAC? AIPAC is an American association of American Jews who use Israel for political empowerment in America.
Right.
Okay. That's it. It's about Americans using Israel to control America. It's that. The Israelis can brag all they want about this, that, and the other thing, but the bottom line is it's America playing Israel. We use Israel. As Joe Biden said, if we didn't have Israel, we'd make one because we need an Israel to get away with it. Again, what's being uncovered right now is a level of corruption in the United States that nobody ever thought possible. Or at least maybe we thought possible, but we didn't think it was ever going to be proven. And you're going to find that our relationship with Israel is one of the most corrupt of relationships, that hundreds of billions of dollars flow into Israel and flow back in a money laundering scheme to buy political influence. This is the reality of Israel, but Israel doesn't exist unless the United States. One thing's for certain. If the United States decided that Israel wouldn't exist, Israel would cease to exist. If Israel decided the United States wouldn't exist, we'd still exist. That tells you who wears the pants. All right. It's not Israel. And I'll give you another example of why Israel isn't in charge. Netanyahu wants the United States to attack Iran. And Trump has said, no, that's not going to happen. We're actually going to work on negotiations with Iran. I'd rather do the negotiation thing. See, people don't believe that Donald Trump is actually serious about avoiding wars. He's serious about negotiations.
We're not as trusting towards politicians these days.
Oh, and nor should we be, because they all lie. And again, I'm going to get in trouble with this, but I don't care anymore. Donald Trump is the most honest American president we've had in a long time, because he says what he thinks. All these clips you're showing us are outrageous clips. Why? Because there's no filter. He is just saying what's on his mind. There's no lawyer going, Mr. President, you can't say that. What the president meant to say is, this. Nobody's doing that to Trump. He's just saying it, putting it on the table, and it's so outrageous. But there's no subterfuge. He's letting you know what he thinks, and he's doing it. That's the kind of honesty we don't ever get in Washington, D.C.
So I guess I'll end with this, which is that if Donald Trump ends this war in Ukraine, and if what you're saying you predict to happen in Gaza does happen, what does that say about the Democratic Party, or more in particular, the Biden-Harris administration? Because I said this earlier today, if Donald Trump ends the Ukraine war, this will be just another thing that Biden and Kamala could have done and refused to do.
Look, yeah, you guys are like, Scott's drank the Kool-Aid. I'm a Reagan Republican. I mean, that Ronald Reagan was my man. And I know he's flawed, and we can have arguments about that. But I just know that Ronald Reagan saved the world with the INF Treaty. And I think everybody owes him that aggressive attitude, because you'd be dead today if he didn't implement the INF Treaty. So I cut Reagan a little bit of slack. But I've always been realistic about the Republican Party. It's not a perfect party, but it's a party that I thought at least tried to do the right thing up until George W. Bush became the president. Then it just went wacko. Then the Paul Wolfowitz people took over and went off the reservation. The Democrats, I've learned to really respect Jimmy Carter as a person. I think he's flawed as a president. Lyndon Johnson, I think, was a great president, flawed, but again, a great. JFK wasn't really given a chance. They killed him. Franklin Roosevelt, Democrat, come on, save the world. So it's not that I'm anti-Democrat. Bill Clinton came in and he destroyed everything because he's a liar. And he began the process of the Democrat lying to everybody about everything, about this new world order. The Democrats didn't know how to handle success. Inheriting a situation where America was the sole remaining superpower, Bill Clinton corrupted everything he touched. Barack Obama was just as bad, a horrible president when the final say is done about what he did from a foreign policy standpoint. And Joe Biden is just Barack Obama dyed white and dumbed down. And so these are people that aren't trying to solve world problems. They're trying to sustain a rules-based international order that lost its legitimacy a long time ago, and they were unwilling to go with the flow. And what's happened is the Republicans and the Democrats sort of came together to where we literally, if you look at the 2016 election, the one where Donald Trump, came down the elevator, who among us, let's just be honest, who among us thought when he came down the elevator, that's the next president of the United States? We all went, oh my God, here comes the comedy show, the clown show, the whatever is going to happen. And then we looked at the Republican Party. They put 17 of their top Republicans. Jeb Bush, a governor of Florida. Little Marco was there. Ted Cruz. I mean, we're talking about powerhouses of the Republican Party. And Donald Trump crushed them all. Why? Because the Republican Party stands for nothing. And he exposed the lies and the deceit and the corruption and the incompetence of the Republican Party. So this man who should never have been near the White House won the Republican nomination because he embarrassed the entire Republican Party. And then he takes on the Democrats. The Democrats have shown themselves to be just the progressive version of what the corrupted conservative version was, the same people. The Democratic Party can't be trusted anymore, just like the old Republican Party can't be trusted anymore. We have one party today in America that has the ability to sustain political dominance, and it's called MAGA. And we can hate it, and there's plenty of I'm not sitting here saying I love everything about MAGA. I think MAGA dangerously leans towards autocracy, and I'm a big constitutionalist. I'm a little worried about the fact that these people seem not to care about constitutional due process, except that, my God, Biden claimed to be Mr. Constitutionalist, and he sent the FBI into my house because I dared say bad things about his policy. That's sort of against the Constitution, free speech. So that the Democrats are the worst of the worst, is worse than the old Republicans. I don't think they're ever coming back from this. I think they have to redefine who they are. There's going to have to be a new political opposition that's going to have to grow to counter the MAGA movement. And it can't be, the Democratic Party as it exists today. There's so many flaws with the Democratic Party on its whole approach towards, building consensus. Look, if I were a Black American, I'd be so angry at the Democratic Party right now for what they've done to Black America, because they literally treated the Black American community as plantation workers, that every 4 years you get to bring in and dress them up and bring them to church and make them think they're special, and then you send them back to the fields. They've treated the Black community like utter crap. It's so disgraceful. And I blame Black leadership for allowing this to happen. The leaders of Baltimore, the leaders of Atlanta, who get rich, the leaders in New York City who get rich off of being the Black leaders, but their job was simply to serve the white president. And the white president would snap his fingers and the Black leaders would come and then bring in their Black congregation and they would vote Democrat, and nothing good ever happened to the Black community. That's the Democratic Party. They were doing the same thing with the Latino vote. They were basically trying to create this diverse group of people whose sole job was to divide America up to make sure that white Republicans couldn't get, down. Donald Trump surprised me. I never would have thought when Donald Trump was first elected in 2016 that he would be the man that would threaten the Democrats' demographic base. But if you look at the results of the 2020 election, which he lost, he was doing dangerous things. Black males were starting to vote for him. Latinos were starting to vote for him. He was starting to attract, college-educated people were starting to shift away from the Democratic base because they recognized how the Democrats have been failing them. Hey, you can't say that everybody drank the Kool-Aid. The people move away from the Democrats because for their entire lives, the Democratic Party has not served them well. And here comes a man who is actually talking about implementing policies that do this. I think that Donald Trump has destroyed the demographics of the modern Democratic Party. And they're going to have to, I believe I'd love to see more than two parties. I'd like to see a third party. And maybe this is a chance for us to do that, because I think Trump has fundamentally destroyed American politics as we know it. And over the course of the next, we're going to see the reality of that in the midterm elections. And then the big test is going to be in the next election. If the Democrats come roaring back and win, then I'm wrong. But I don't think the Democrats can. I don't think they have the ability to organize the nation. The nation doesn't trust them anymore. And if Trump can pull off half the crap that he's trying to pull off, the MAGA is going to be unbeatable. Donald Trump, just so everybody understands this, if he pulls off the trifecta of what he's trying to achieve in terms of stopping the war in Ukraine, stabilizing the Middle East, preventing expansion of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and ending the potential of an Israeli-Iranian war by coming up with a good nuclear deal, and then stopping the potential of a war in Taiwan, any one of those three deserve the Nobel Peace Prize. Wow. All you Trump haters are out there, he can't get the Nobel Peace Prize. He's Donald Trump. He's the worst man in the world. If he stops the war in Ukraine, you guys do know your history, right? I just expect your audience to be very educated, because Teddy Roosevelt won the Nobel Peace Prize for stopping the Russian-Japanese War. All right? If Donald Trump stops the Russian-Ukrainian war, don't you think he deserves recognition for that? If Donald Trump prevents a war from breaking out over Taiwan, don't you think he deserves credit for that? If Donald Trump can actually create the conditions for peace in the Middle East where there's a possibility of a Palestinian state, doesn't he deserve recognition for that? Or do you hate Donald Trump so much that you can't even consider the possibility of the man may have actually earned the Nobel Peace Prize, unlike Barack Obama, who was just given it?
Well, we'll end it with this. Notori says he is not lying. Scott, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. This is why, again, I tell everybody in the audience, I like to bring on different opinions and voices to come onto the show, because I think people do need to hear what other people have to say. But thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. Have a good night. And enjoy the comments you're going to get. But
bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, let's go to the comments over here and then we'll go to the next story. Thank you, Tim. Though Nancy Pelosi gets the last laugh with her insider trading. Thank you for this one. No party affiliations over here. We working in facts. Thank you, at Kid. Sabby, what does Scott think about Tulsi, RFK Jr., and FBI Patel? Will they bring any changes affecting MIC? Salute to Scott for speaking truth to power. I'll have to ask him about that next time. Although he has spoken about RFK before, I think, on the show. Thank you, T-Rex, for the Sabs story. LOL. It's a koala bear. Thank you, Tim. Scott is based, but I disagree on Gaza, period. Skylar says, if Trump ends the war in Ukraine and manages to help the Palestinians, the Dems will be even more cooked than they already are. Thank you, Marvin. Thanks, Scott. Good breakdown. Thank Zio. Money plus blackmail runs the U.S. Thank you, Tim. Okay, Scott, you say Trump is honest, but when he says he's going to ethnically cleanse Gaza, lying, Trump is doing what he was paid to do by Miriam and AIPAC. And thank you, Focus. I say we test the theory that Israel wouldn't exist without the U.S. support for science. Let's get that comment on Rumble. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Snorky. Please ask Scott if BRICS was funded by U.S. Oh, I missed this. I'm sorry. If USAID. I can ask that next time. That's a good question. Okay. All righty. Smash the like, fam. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. We are going on to the next story, ladies and gentlemen. I do want you to see this because something is happening here, and I just don't want people to fall for this again. I don't want people to fall for this BS again. And I want to ask you about this story. Who do you think in the end is going to have the last laugh? It was brought to my attention that Bernie Sanders is at it again. You see, this call went out from Sam Brody. Inbox, Bernie Sanders is launching a national tour to fight oligarchy beginning this weekend in Omaha and Iowa City. Okay, let's stop there for a second before I get to what the message says. I'm all for fighting against the oligarchy. All for it. But this is a copycat. I'll show you the copycat in just a second. I'm going to show you what Bernie Sanders is really trying to do. It says Bernie Sanders next weekend will launch a new national campaign titled Fighting Oligarchy, Where We Go From Here, which will focus on the takeover of the national government by billionaires and large corporations and the country's move towards authoritarianism. The tour will target working class districts won by Biden in 2020 and a Republican House member in 2024. So stop right there. Look at where he's choosing to focus, right? He's going to focus on districts that Biden won in 2020, but a Republican won as a congressional candidate. Look at the areas that he's choosing to target, right? Omaha, Nebraska. So it looks like he's going there first. For the first leg of the tour, Senator Sanders will hold town halls in Omaha and Iowa City, where he will discuss the most pressing issues facing working class people and outline how Americans can fight back against President Trump and Elon Musk, who are quickly moving the country towards authoritarianism, oligarchy, and kleptocracy. So Omaha and Iowa City. Why did he pick those two places? To start with, think about that for a second. Because what Bernie's trying to do is he's trying to get white working class voters back into the Democratic Party. That's what this really is about. This push here from Bernie Sanders, the national tour to fight the oligarchy, is him trying to get back some of these working class white voters who maybe some of them supported Trump, maybe some of them just did not vote at all, but he's trying to get them, that base, to come back into the Democratic Party. Now, one of the problems with this is if you're going to fight against the oligarchy, you need to acknowledge the oligarchy in your own party. When Bernie Sanders was running for president in 2020 and 2016, this is something that he called out multiple times. Billionaire money, all of this money that's coming in, corporate money, running grassroots campaign is what he did. And he was able to raise a lot of money off of small dollar donations. But the reality is, this is not just Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Both are billionaires, yes. But Bernie Sanders typically votes along with the Democratic Party, who very much takes billionaire money, whether it's from George Soros or Bill Gates, just to name a few. Don't forget about Michael Bloomberg. Both parties take billionaire money. The oligarchy didn't just appear under Donald Trump's presidency for 2025. Oligarchy was still here under Biden and Kamala Harris' presidency. So one of the things I want you to understand and pay attention to what the Democratic Party does is that when they are not in power, all of a sudden they want to get up and fight. Let's fight. But when they're in power and they have the House and they have the Senate, they decide to do nothing. Because the reality is they don't really want to do anything for the working class people. Why didn't Bernie Sanders launch this national tour under Biden and Harris's campaign? Under their presidency, excuse me. Why did he launch it then? Tell me. Was there not an oligarchy at that point in time? There was. There has been as long as I've been alive. Why does he decide to launch it now that Trump is in office? Didn't Biden take billionaire money? He doesn't do it because he knows that that would be a mark against the party that he chooses to caucus with most of the time. Although he's a registered independent, he caucuses with the Democratic Party. There are a number of times where Bernie Sanders' vote probably could have made a difference if you're looking at things to go more in a left direction, or even when it comes to some of these war legislation, and he chooses not to. Professor Zinkas brings this up right here. So why didn't he do that when 150 billionaires supported Biden, then Kamala in the 2024 race? Can't take this nonsense seriously. So this is a good question again. Remember, Kamala Harris had billions of dollars for her campaign. Bernie Sanders told you to support Kamala Harris, right? Isn't that what he told you to do? I'll remind you of that if you forgot. Where was this push to fight back against the oligarchy when the party that he caucuses with were lining up billionaire donors? Where was that? Where was that push when Kamala Harris said, I'm gladly and happily taking money in support from Goldman Sachs? Where was that? None of that was nowhere to be found. This tour that Bernie Sanders is doing is just another attempt to put you back into the Democratic Party. Because you're not serious if you're talking about fighting against oligarchy and billionaire money, if you are still telling people to support the party that takes billionaire money. You're not serious. And he's also copying people. This is a copycat. Bernie Sanders, I find it very interesting that you decide to do this tour against the oligarchy after Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant announce that they are doing an organizing conference to fight back against the rich and the two parties. Now, Jill and Kshama were on my show to discuss this, and they've been on other shows as well. And I just want to remind everybody that Jill and Kshama announced this last year. You think Bernie Sanders didn't see this? You think Bernie Sanders doesn't know who Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant are? He knows exactly who they are. This conference that Jill Stein and Kshama Sawant put together with Chris Hedges, by the way, fight the rich and stop their two parties. So I find it funny, and that is going to be February 22nd, 10 a.m. Pacific time. She'll be on the West Coast. So I find it very funny that Bernie Sanders comes in and now he's doing this tour after this was announced. Now he's doing a tour. Let's fight back against the oligarchy. So let me explain to you what is really happening here, because I do not want people to get duped again. I was very, very, very surprised to see people's eyes light up once again. The moment that email went out, there are a number of people who were like, oh, I think this means he might run for president again. Oh my God, that would be great. Do it again. Just like that, people's eyes started to light up again. Just like that, people started to fall for it all over again. And I'm making very sure that my viewers don't fall for that. Bernie Sanders exists in this political space the same reason why AOC exists in this political space, to prevent any type of activism or organizing on the outside to lead you in a different direction. Don't you think it's a little bit strange that this event was already announced? Don't you find it odd that Bernie Sanders, instead of reaching out to Jill Stein and Shama Sawant and Chris Hedges and joining them along with this effort, which is things that he agrees in, don't you find it strange that instead of joining them to do that, he launches a separate thing, same message? Because his tour, again, is to bring you back into the Democratic Party. His tour is not to get you out of the two-party system. It's to keep you in it. Bernie Sanders exists in this political space to prevent any type of third-party movement. He exists in this political space to prevent any type of organizing on the outside from turning voters into something else and away from the Democratic Party. It is very important that you understand that. And AOC for the very same thing. Why do you think AOC heavily attacked Jill Stein the way that she did? She exists as a distraction. She is there to keep you where you are. She is there to prevent you from turning your face and turning your cheek and looking at something else. She is a distraction, and I do not want my viewers to be distracted. Those of us who are activists and organizers, we have seen this game before. Every time we try to organize something on the ground on our own, somebody from the Democratic Party just happens to show up. Let us bring this into the Democratic Party as well. Didn't you see that happen with BLM? If it's not the Democratic Party, it's corporate donors, it's corporate sponsors. You see, I don't take sponsorships on this show. There is a reason for that. They co-op it, they water it down, and they take the movement from the grassroots so that nothing gets done. There is a reason why some people will not have me on their show, because I will say just this. Because they want their viewers to believe that these people are there to help you. These people are not there to help you. These people are there to help their pockets and to keep you in a system that continues to keep you poor or weak. So Bernie Sanders, is splitting the left. That's what he's trying to do here. He's trying to split this so that this gets less support and his tour gets more support. And I'm telling you guys, don't fall for it, goddammit. If you look at what they're fighting for in the wars, stop mass deportations, $25 an hour minimum wage, this is everything that Bernie Sanders agrees with, yet he is going to start something separate. Shama Sawant was correct when she said the road through the Democratic Party as a progressive leads to a graveyard. There is no movement for you in there. Bernie knows this. In fact, if you think that he forgot, or if you forgot, I just want to remind you, every time Bernie Sanders said, we got this movement, we're going to fight back against the billionaires, and he cheap herded you right back into the Democratic Party and said, support the corporate establishment. 2016, Hillary Clinton.
And we have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine. Brothers and sisters, brothers and sisters, this is the real world that we live in. Trump is a bully and a demagogue. Trump has made bigotry and hatred the cornerstone of his campaign. Thank you.
So that was Bernie Sanders being booed by his own supporters when he told them to vote for Hillary Clinton to stop Donald Trump. By the way, we're talking about the Ukraine war. Who's closer at ending that war? Was it the Democratic Party or is it Donald Trump right now? Once upon a time, Bernie Sanders used to call for, we got to end these wars, but he's voting for a lot of these things. Let's fast forward. Let's go to 2020 when he told you to support Joe Biden.
And we need Joe Biden as our next president. Let me take this opportunity to say a word to the millions of people who supported my campaign this year and in 2016. My friends, thank you for your trust, your support, and the love you showed Jane, me, and our family. Together, we have moved this country in a bold new direction, showing that all of us, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, native born and immigrant, yearn for a nation based on the principles of justice, love, and compassion. Our campaign ended several months ago, but our movement continues and is getting stronger every day.
The movement didn't continue, though. After Biden won, Bernie went back to sleep. Bernie said if he lost, he would be out in the street with his supporters. He was not. That did not happen. So the movement didn't continue. Okay. Now we're going to fast forward to 2024. Again, I'm trying to show you what Bernie Sanders is and what he is really all about. He is doing it yet again, and I will not let my audience fall for the BS. 2024, after a genocide.
I understand that there are millions of Americans who disagree with President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris on the terrible war in Gaza. I am one of them. While Israel had a right to defend itself against the horrific Hamas terrorist attack of October 7th, which killed 1,200 innocent people and took 250 hostages, it did not have the right to wage an all-out war against the entire Palestinian people. It did not have the right to kill 42,000 Palestinians, 2/3 of whom were children, women, and the elderly, or injure over 100,000 people in Gaza. It did not have the right to destroy Gaza's infrastructure, housing, and healthcare system. It did not have the right to bomb every one of Gaza's 12 universities. It did not have the right to block humanitarian aid, causing massive malnutrition in children and, in fact, starvation. And that is why I am doing everything I can to block U.S. military aid and offensive weapons sales to the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government in Israel.
And who allowed all those things to happen? Wasn't that the Biden-Harris administration that allowed all those things to happen?
And I know that many of you share those feelings. And some of you are saying, how can I vote for Kamala Harris if she is supporting this terrible war? And that is a very fair question.
And there he goes again. So do you see how he even called it a war and not a genocide? I supported Bernie when he was running for president. I donated money to Bernie Sanders. Taught me not to donate to politicians again. I never, ever thought that he would move the way that he did. And now he's doing it again. And I'm here to warn you that this little tour that Bernie Sanders is talking about, He's trying to make it seem like it's just this fight back against the oligarchy, kind of like an Occupy Wall Street movement. But he made it very clear in the email he's focusing on certain areas that Biden won in 2020, but a Republican House member won also during that time. So what it is to tell you is that Bernie Sanders is once again trying to sheep herd you back into the party. Now, it was one thing to try to sheep herd people into the party during 2016. And you're like, oh no, we fear Trump. Let's just go ahead and support Hillary after they even cheated you. And you didn't even have a backbone. You didn't even have a backbone to call it out and hold them accountable. No, you went out there on the road and you helped campaign for Hillary Clinton. The same people that they gave it to, they cheated you. That was one thing. And then there was even another thing for you to tell people after a damn genocide that you got to support Kamala Harris. How do you get worse than that, ladies and gentlemen? I want to say this again. Bernie Sanders and people in AOC, they exist in the political space to prevent any type of outside movement or outside third-party movement from ever taking fruition. You have to understand that. As much as she pointed her fingers at Jill Stein and said, oh, the Green Party needs to do this, needs to do that, she doesn't want that to happen at all. Bernie Sanders doesn't want that to happen at all. Hell, if you say Jill Stein in front of Bernie Sanders, he probably melt in the damn chair. Can't utter her name. Pretends like Jill and Sharma don't exist, but he like to steal their ideas. I've been telling you guys this for a long time. A lot of these things that you see happen or come out of some of these these politicians' mouths, it came from the grassroots first. They get a hold of it, they water it down and run it as a political move. And as long as people continue doing this, we will never build something powerful outside of the two-party system. Bernie Sanders, if he really gave a damn about the oligarchy and about what was left of his movement, Bernie Sanders would have still been talking to you and marching with you and fighting with you in the damn streets after Biden won. It's a game. I don't want you guys to fall for this again. And I saw people falling for it, and I saw people getting excited about it. And I want you to hear what Sharma had to say, and you'll see the difference between the two.
I served as the only socialist on the Seattle City Council for 10 years. In that decade, my council office led movements of working people to win historic victories, including the highest minimum wage in the country. I also saw firsthand how and sadly, many labor leaders all work in concert together against the interests of workers. I can tell you from my experience, and it is increasingly evident to working people, that this system is completely irredeemable, as are both U.S. political parties. We have no choice but to fight for radical change and for an end to the billionaire class, because the alternative is a hellscape on earth. The wildfires in Los Angeles are just the latest demonstration. Another is the fastest moving genocide of the 21st century, still underway in Gaza and likely to continue in some form, even with the ceasefire negotiated by Trump under the pressure of the anti-war movement and significant vote for Jill Stein.
So it's a longer thing here, but I do want you to hear what she said about fighting back against the two parties.
Workers Strike Back, including our upcoming week of action, February 8th to the 15th, to support Amazon workers in North Carolina, as well as our mass organizing conference in Seattle on February 22nd, where we'll be joined by Chris Hedges, Jill Stein, and working people from around the country to build our movement and to discuss how we can begin laying the foundation for a new major party for working people. The next day, on February 23rd, Worker Strike Back members will be voting at our first ever national convention in person in Seattle on our priorities for 2025, including
fight the rich. Okay, so fight the rich, Medicare for all, end the genocide in Gaza, tax Amazon and big business, fund social housing, etc. So again, these are things that Bernie Sanders agrees with. So I think you guys can see the difference. There's no movement with inside all the people say, oh, we can still push and reform the Democratic Party. No, you can't. Bernie Sanders is living proof of that. How do you have a movement with hundreds and thousands of people out in the streets and then you just turn on them like that and just flip and say, I'll just go along with the. What you see Sharma doing, and for the people who say, where's Jill Stein? Where the fuck is Kamala Harris? Jill Stein's working with Sharma Sawant to build a movement against the oligarchy. Where's Kamala? They know who these people are. They know they're activists. They know what they're really doing. And that's why they put everything that they could and threw it at them to try to stop them or silence them and to shut them down. Every independent media channel on YouTube should have had Sharma Sawant on their show by now. Everyone should have had her on. And the reason why a lot of them will not bring her on is because she opposes both parties. She won the fight for 15 in Amazon, against Amazon in Seattle. She knows how to win. Chris Smalls also, he knows how to do this. And by the way, I don't see a lot of people talking about Chris Smalls anymore. All the love that people had for Chris Smalls after he won against Amazon and they created the first Amazon union. I don't see a lot of these people who said that Chris Smalls was their buddy. I ain't see these people have Chris Smalls on their show in the past 2 years. They don't care anymore because it's not trending. For the people who said build something with labor, what happened to all those people? Where they at? Where you at? Nowhere to be found, because as soon as presidential election season begins, it's let's just focus on who the Democrat candidate is going to be. And I'm here to tell you guys, today is a new day. If there's any wake up call that should have come for a lot of people that are on the left, and I mean the real left, I ain't talking about you know, not like this so-called Hillary Clinton left. Any wake up call that should have come is the fact that not just the fact that Trump won again, but the way that he won. And the way he came in and is doing whatever he wants, just write an executive order. Regardless, he is giving his base exactly what they were asking for. So this needs to be a big wake up call to those on the left, because the Democratic Party hasn't been doing it for us. They haven't been doing it. So why would you still support them? Gotta wake up. Let's go to some of the comments here. And we got one more story for you, a pretty quick one. Thank you, David. Excellent interview with Scott. Please post on YouTube separately. I want to send to friends. I will. If you're new, I clip all of the stories. Actually, Eric will clip all of the news stories and we post them as separate clips as well. Thank you, Just Trash. After working for Sanders in 2016, I realized that Luigi Mangione did more to fight the oligarchy in one morning than Bernie Sanders has in 44 years. Well, we say allegedly, we still I say allegedly because Luigi hasn't been convicted. Shout out to Vilma Thomas for the super sticker. Thank you. Thank you, Fatima. Okay, hashtag Sabby Savage. You're on fire tonight. Shout out to Scott too. I don't always agree, but I do believe he means well and he may be on to something. Thank you, Tobin. Bernie Sanders phenomenon aged like Wonder Bread. Thank you, DeAndre. After Bernie's campaign was derailed in 2016 and AOC was shut down by Pelosi, they should have joined a third party if those two were serious about change. Bingo. We have to be careful about the people that sometimes people are selected. Thank you, Harry. Sure, it's genocide, but what if something bad happens? That's exactly what they were saying. Let's get the comment on Rumble. Thank you. Hey. Thank you, Sparky. Steve Witkoff, bitch slapped Netanyahu. Damn. Interesting. Thank you, Roger. Democrats took a page right out of the FBI, did Edgar Hoover playbook to prevent the rise of a charismatic Black Messiah, but in this case, to prevent the rise of a charismatic leftist Messiah. There you go. And thank you, baby Ethernet. Both parties quietly oversaw a genocide. There you go. Okie dokie. We have one more story for you guys. Again, I want you to ask yourself who gets the last laugh in this one. We have two news networks, CNN and Fox News, saying some really ratchet things here about the Palestinian people, about Gaza, about the situation. And I want you to ask yourself, who got the last laugh? We're going to start with Jesse Waters first. Jesus Christ. This is probably one of the most cringe statements I've heard. I want you to listen to what he had to say about the Palestinians. Check this out.
But this population in Palestine is hostile. It's uneducated. It's even more radicalized than they were at the beginning of this. I mean, now they have no homes at all. They're even more hateful of the Israelis. And their birth rate is explosive. The average Palestinian woman has 5.5 babies. The average Israeli woman has only 2.5 babies. So demographically, they're a threat, not to mention the national security threat. There is no way you can have these two peoples living side by side.
Interesting.
But this population in Palestine is hostile. It's uneducated.
Doesn't that sound familiar? These people are hostile, uneducated. How can you call people uneducated after all the schools have been bombed? Gaza was a ghetto. Gaza had dirty water. Israel controlled the electricity. Israel would turn the electricity off whenever they felt like it. Wouldn't allow certain foods to come into Gaza. If you were sick, if you got cancer, for example, you would need to go to an Israeli hospital. Israel gets to decide whether or not you're allowed to get the treatment. For them to allow you to come out of the gate that they've closed you in. How smart does he expect everybody to be when Israel is controlling the resources? And now they've bombed most of the schools. Imagine saying something like this.
It's even more radicalized than they were at the beginning of this. I mean, now they have no homes at all. They're even...
Who got rid of the homes? Israel did. But he's not going to say that. Otherwise, he won't keep his gig on Fox News.
More hateful of the Israelis. And their birth rate is explosive. The average Palestinian woman has 5.5 babies.
I thought you were pro-life. If anything, you should be happy about their birth rate. Now you want them to have less children? What happened to pro-life?
The average Israeli woman has only 2.5 babies. So demographically, they're a threat.
So what he's saying is there's too many of them. He wants them to have less children because he wants the Israelis to be the largest population. I can't even believe he was able to say this. I really can't believe this. I can't believe he still has a job at Fox News, to be honest.
Not to mention the national security threat. There is no way you can have these two peoples living side by side.
This guy right here, Jesse Waters, because some of those things you just heard him say about the Palestinian people in Gaza, those are some of the same things I heard people say about Black people here in the United States. So I want you to think about that when you see this asshole up on the screen who has to wear like pounds of makeup. That's the first one. Then we go to CNN. Like I said, both of them. CNN also not with it on this issue. Listen to this. Now all of a sudden, Abby Phillips is going to pretend like she cares about what happens to the Palestinian people. But when Biden and Kamala were in office, she didn't give a damn what was happening to those Palestinian people. In fact, she was just like, well, give Kamala a chance and let her negotiate and and figure this out. I told you guys, I predicted this would happen, that once Donald Trump won, that CNN and MSNBC would all of a sudden pretend to care about the Palestinian people. Listen to this.
They've been debating internally, according to my sources, recognizing as the United States of America, the renaming of the West Bank to Judea and Samaria. There's a bill about that.
Annexation.
That's what they're talking about. It's not exactly annexation.
You know what? Let me
it's just
actually
erasing the name of the West
Let me
Bank.
go ahead and play this, because this is the man that Trump has chosen as the ambassador to Israel, and everything that we're talking about here was telegraphed by him. This is in 2008 and in 2017. Listen to this.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian.
So that's Mike Huckabee, and he's saying in this video, there's no such thing as a Palestinian. He's, and I believe he's an evangelist, right? Like Mike Huckabee is all the way over. He crazy as hell. But I want to show you something. Because I want to point something out, because it's not just Mike Huckabee.
My feeling personally, and I'm speaking only as a person, I think Israel would only be acting on the property it already owns. I think Israel has title deed to Judea to use.
Okay, so
this is illegal.
So again, he believes there's no Palestine and that should all go to Israel. Again, he's a nutty, he's nutty as hell. But one thing that I noticed is that they never pointed these comments out when Richie Torres said similar things. Abby Martin never played a video about that. Richie Torres, Democrat, also crazed Zionist. But she would never play it because, again, he's a Democrat. So do you see how these networks, what they do? But don't worry. That's why you got some of us here for independent media. Listen to the rest of this.
This is illegal. This is what he just said, that is a violation of every international law. It's a violation of every convention that the United States, by the way, was part of. It's a violation of
Human decency.
But also every UN resolution. It's a violation of International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court resolutions. What they are saying.
Abby Phillips. Yes, sorry. I keep saying Abby Martin, Abby Phillips. Thank you, Arthur.
Tonight, to the world and to the international community, international law is dead. It's
Scott,
dead.
is international law dead? Because I think Rula is right in suggesting that that's basically what Trump is suggesting. Forcibly removing Palestinians from their land is against international law.
Yeah, but a lot of things that happened under Kamala and Biden were also against international law, but y'all didn't give a damn then. The same thing with the West Bank. Taking those homes from Palestinians in the West Bank is also against international law. Israel starving people in Gaza and not allowing food and aid to come in was also against international law. But you guys didn't have a problem with any of these things when it was happening under Biden and Kamala. Now you have a problem because it's happening under Donald Trump. So that's the first criticism. The second one was going to come to him.
I think we're being a little dramatic and we're on our jump to conclusions, Matt, here a little bit. He muses occasionally.
Take him at his word.
He muses occasionally.
Look,
and
just to be clear,
it's
because you're suggesting that we are making this up or
I'm not suggesting anything.
It.
No, you're putting words in my mouth.
Well,
I'm saying you and I both know he muses occasionally and he's aspirational and he says provocative things
Scott,
occasionally.
I really don't want to interrupt you, but I just for my own, I think I have to come to my own defense here in saying Donald Trump, with his own words, said this is what he wants to do. He wasn't musing. He was looking down at a piece of paper. I've been in a room with him, just like that, with foreign leaders, looking down at a piece of paper. He is reading a statement that was prepared for him. Those are not musings.
Well, Scott, what happened to America first? This is the guy who was supposed to take us out of the endless wars, said he's against nation building. He railed against IM.
I know. playing the role of Catherine tonight.
I do want Scott.
Are you for the ethnic cleansing or against it?
Look, I don't know that I agree with the term.
Okay, so let me pause here. I have to refresh this because it's Sorry about that. Sometimes it does that. Let me go back to where I was.
But I just, for my own, I.
Out of the endless wars, said he's against nation building. He railed against I am.
I know. Playing the role of Catherine tonight.
Are you for the ethnic cleansing or against it?
Look, I don't
You're
know
not
that,
for it?
I don't
You're
know
not
that I
against
agree
it?
with the terminology you're using. Here's what I think. It's provocative. It's an interesting conversation point. Donald Trump, he's the only person in the world speaking positively about this particular geography right now. And I will just say that in the first term, he did something rather audacious with the Abraham Accords, highly successful. He's always thought positively and aspirationally about the Middle East. And I would just ask all of you all who are enraged about this, how's it going right now? How's the current management doing?
Not really all that well. To answer you, and that's because of Americans' weapons and American inability to enforce.
So look at the look on Scott's face when she mentions America's weapons, right? And America's inability. So she's getting into this here, right? So Scott's going to push back and say, well, I don't have anything. Don't blame America for this, but you have to blame America. Where do you think the weapons come from? But he's like, oh, I don't want to take any part in this. This is all Hamas's fault, but it's not. But she's going to school him. So listen to this part.
You're blaming us for the management problems in Gaza? Come on.
Wasn't doing a great job before.
Okay, let's be honest. We have a 58-year-old occupation that is illegal, that decimated people's hopes and lives. And
Pause. Look at the look on his face, the expression on his face when she said occupation. This is the part that people don't want to hear. This is the part that people don't want you to mention. They just want to start with October 7th, but they don't want to get to the why October 7th happened in the first damn place. They don't want to talk about the occupation. They don't want to talk about the oppression. They just want to start with everything happened on October 7th, and that's how we got here. No, that's not how you got there. Because the same criticism that you can make towards Hamas, and yes, Hamas did kill people on October 7th, and we do acknowledge that. The same criticism that you can give to them for October 7th, you need to give that same criticism towards Israel in 1948. Or any time that Israel went into Gaza and mowed the lawn before October 7th. Or when Israel shot at the feet of Palestinian protesters when they were peacefully protesting against apartheid. So this is the game, folks. Scott is there to make sure that he sticks to what his party, supposed to believe. Even some conservatives I know got a problem with this situation. But he's there to say, oh, I'm just going to stick to that and just blame everything on Hamas and pretend like Israel has done nothing wrong. That's the role of Scott. Even though he is a contributor there on CNN, that is his role. Abby Martin's role, even though it's her panel show or whatever, is to basically pretend like the Democratic Party did everything that they could do and that all the blame should go on the Republican Party. When we know the genocide started under Biden and Kamala, and she didn't want to hold them accountable. So these people have roles and they're paid to play a role. But she sets him straight. This is her name is Rula. She's a Palestinian foreign policy commentator.
I'm the only Palestinian here. And I must say that it honestly, the fact that we are not able to put in perspective that's the history of that region. Before October 7th, hundreds of people were killed. After October 7th, still thousands and thousands of people are getting killed.
And what happened on that day?
For 58 years.
What happened on that day?
You know what? What happened on that day? Actually, Secret Service of Israel had been predicted what happened on that day. What happened on that day is we had basically, a border that was, breached because we have a government in Israel, and as I am an Israeli-Palestinian government, we had a government in Israel that favored annexation and pogroms in the West Bank.
I'm just asking you what happened that day.
I want to tell you something. We had a government, we had the prime minister who said Hamas is an asset. We need to finance Hamas. He's the one that sent to Doha, the head of the Secret Service, 3 weeks before October 7th, to ask the Qataris to finance Hamas.
But you don't want to say what happened. You don't want to say what happened that day.
It's an atrocity.
So this is this is the game. This is the talking point. Let's just go back to what happened on that day. I don't want to hear anything else that you have to say. Let's just go back to that. That's what Scott is paid to do. Look at the pin on his suit jacket. Donald Trump let the quiet part out in the open. Donald Trump let you know it's really over 500,000 that have been killed. Meanwhile, under Biden and Kamala, they've been lying to you all this time about these numbers. I told you. But he wants you to go back to what happened on October 7th. 500,000 people versus 1,200, which, by the way, even Israel's own ministry came forward and admitted that they killed some of their own people on October 7th.
Atrocity that happened that day.
Yeah,
but
and where did it emanate?
That atrocity is it doesn't justify the atrocities and the war crimes and the genocidal campaign that happened after.
I totally reject everything you just said about genocide, war crimes. Israel has every right to defend itself.
I don't want us to get
not by committing war crimes.
I don't want us to get off course because I think that it is easy to redirect this conversation about October 7th when what we're talking about right now is what happens today and tomorrow and what comes next. And I want to ask you just a follow-up to what you said. Hold on. A follow-up to what you said. Trump is talking positively about the region, but in his view of Gaza, the Palestinians do not exist. How is that something that is positive for Palestinians? 2 million people that live there right now.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't give a lot of detail.
There are not 2 million people who live there right now. These are the people, guys, these are the people that are on corporate media. These are the people on the mainstream news. Just lie after lie after lie. There are not 2 million Palestinians in Gaza right now. There were 2 million prior to October 7th. Why is she telling this lie? Did she do, you think Abby Phillips, by the way, I think I said Abby Martin before earlier as well. Do you think Abby Phillips does any research about these topics before she shows up to work? Or do you think she just show up and she sit down and they put stuff in front of her and say, read this? Because as someone who majored in broadcast journalism, I'll tell you it's the latter. Just pulling numbers out of nowhere. No research.
About how he envisions the future for that population, and I certainly am not in a position to flesh it out either, because I don't know what he means by that. Here's what I do know: current management failing, a president of the United States who's speaking positively about what could be happening in that region, and you all talk about the Middle East being on fire, and nobody seems to want to acknowledge on whose watch it was set ablaze. And so, I think sometimes he tosses things out, and it's to start a conversation, and we'll see where it goes.
Displacing millions of people.
Sending U.S. troops.
I think it's also necessary, and I said this earlier, but the fact that we still have hostages, the fact that we still have hostages that aren't brought back yet, the fact that seems to be somewhat of an overlooked portion of this.
This clown here to the right, named Bakari Sellers, by the way, he's also a Zionist. He also sold out to AIPAC. You guys need to know these things when you see them on these shows, so that you understand why they have the talking points that they have. Bakari Sellers is known as Bakari Sellout because that's exactly what he did. He's like, oh, let's talk about the hostages that they still have, the Israeli hostages. When you're talking about Israel has way more Palestinian hostages. We're talking about children that have been abused in the detention centers. You're talking about people that have been sexually assaulted by Israel, which has been publicly displayed. And Bakari Sellers comes in and says, well, you know, there's still those hostages there, because that's what he is paid to say. Everyone needs to know this. He's a sellout.
We have a deal, not only that. I'm interested to see, and there are people smarter than me about this, but what effect does this have on any ceasefire deal. What effect
There's
is it?
no ceasefire.
He suggested that it might actually affect it, and he.
So that's my point. I mean, if there are people who have, you know, the innocent men, women, and children of Palestinian babies and innocent women and children in their heart and minds at the forefront, then they want a ceasefire. We want a ceasefire. If there are individuals who want the hostages brought home, then they want a ceasefire so those hostages can be brought home. Today makes no sense in actually moving that ball down the field.
And what about the American families who don't want their loved ones who serve in our service to go fight another war overseas in the Middle East that he has no clear vision for? But he talked about U.S. boots on the ground. That's a slap in the face to MAGA voters who specifically rejected the old neoconservative ideology.
Not only that,
he sounds like Liz Cheney.
But not only that, you have
Oh. So he says Trump sounds like Liz Cheney. So now all of a sudden Liz Cheney is a problem again? But you had no problem with Liz Cheney when she was a part of Kamala Harris's campaign and they were going across the country on the campaign trail. Now all of a sudden you got a problem with Liz Cheney again. These people are cartoon characters. They're cartoon characters. We're living in a cartoon. Like, I don't know how a lot of these people look, how they look themselves in the mirror. Like, how do they do that? How do they deal with themselves? Like when they leave the studio, when they go home, how do they do that? How do they deal with that? How do you look yourself in the face in the morning? How do you look yourself in the face in the mirror, spewing these lies?
Exactly what Russia and China have been saying. It's all about the land. And basically, nobody watched what the Chinese said tonight. They said, we know exactly what they want, the Americans. Gaza, outside the Gaza shores, they discovered oil and gas. So it's not only
but this
that
isn't
it will be a real estate.
But this isn't a new concept. I mean, in March.
1 second. It's about colonialism. Donald Trump today, he proposed a new vision for America, and it's colonialism. And he's been proposing this for other areas, Panama and other places. But tonight he went further. He said, Palestinians, we will send them, left and right, whatever. And Palestinians, by the way, the millions of Palestinians, they have families in the West Bank. They have families in Jerusalem. I have families in Gaza, and my family lives both in Haifa, in Jaffa, and in the West Bank. We can move them there. Why not allow the women and children to move actually to where they have relatives? Why not allow the orphans? There's 38,000 orphans in Gaza. We have orphanages that are empty in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, in Ramallah, in Jenin, and elsewhere. But you see that the vision is actually bypassing the Palestinians and ethnically cleansing.
I reject one portion of your statement, which is to say that there was a new vision of colonialism for the United States of America. That I think that's as old as the United States of America. That's not necessarily a new vision.
I think the point that she's making is right.
No, but I'm also
just Trump is doing right now that is about grabbing land. Yeah. There's no question about it.
No question. But I mean, this isn't a new
concept.
Buying Greenland versus invading Gaza is two very different things.
Ethnic cleansing versus anything else is different. But colonialism is not something that's new to the United States.
It's not new.
And that's my only point. But also, can we just point out the fact that like Donald Trump is probably the most honest broker we've had in American politics in recent history. Because nothing that he's saying, nothing that he's doing is not something that he didn't tell us he was going to do.
So the point that I want to bring across is this. It's just really sad, like when you look at these pundits, because the reality is this. It's interesting that now you guys can sit there and admit that this is about a land grab. But when many of us have been saying that even prior to October 7th, we were called, we were smeared. We were called anti-Israel. Some people were called anti-Semitic. These people have known all along that Israel wants that land. It's not just about the Donald Trump thing. They have known a long time Israel wants the land. Bakari Sellers, you are in bed with AIPAC. You know what they want. You know they want the land. And all these people get together and they sit around this table and they're like, oh, let's just sit here and talk about this. And let's just go back and forth around this table and da-da-da-da-da. And who knows how much they get paid, but they're getting paid a lot more than you guys to sit there and just tell lies. You had a Palestinian woman right there at the table. And what killed me is that all the other people who are not Palestinian are going to try to tell her about what's happening to her people. Then you have Jesse Waters here talking about these Palestinians are having too many babies. I thought you're supposed to be pro-life. These people, they're caricatures. Like, seriously, I can't understand this. I can't understand this. These people are paid puppets. This man has on more makeup than me. They get dressed up. They put makeup on them. They put them in front of the TV to dumb you down. It's sick. It's gross. It's disgusting. And everybody needs to push back on it. These people are not commentators. These people are actors. And everyone needs to start calling them that. Stop calling them journalists. They don't do no damn journalism. Stop calling them commentators. They are actors. They are paid actors. That's what they are. And they have been playing a role in front of you for the longest time. Don't nobody need that much damn makeup. Paid actors. But who gets the last laugh? I would say independent media does, because independent media is getting more and more views. Independent media is growing. People are leaving these corporate news networks and they're choosing to, let me see what else is out there. Let me see what someone else is saying. Because if you switch onto all these different news networks and it sounds like the same talking points over and over, it's because it is. They all operate off a script. I don't even think some of these people believe what they're saying themselves sometimes. So I'd say in the end, I think independent media gets the last laugh. There's a reason why they're losing viewers. Let's go to some of the comments here, ladies and gentlemen. The Oracle said it's a clown show in kabuki theater from start to finish. I see. Yes. I agree. Let me go over here. Sorry. Thank you, Sajad. I am not a Trumper, but I think he is open to single payer or at least Medicare Advantage, because Trump without the people around him is for single payer. That's interesting. Want to see more. 170K. Let's go, Sab. Congrats. 170. Oh, wow. That must have just happened. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for your support. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Literacy rate in Gaza, 98%. Literacy rate in the US, 79%. Thank you, Dwayne. Ashkenazi Israelis putting the Nazi in Ashkenazi since 1948. Tabitha says, exactly, Sabby. Torres and Jeffries are well-paid, big AIPAC-owned Zionists. Yes, they are. Thank you, baby Ethernet. CNN suddenly has amnesia. Call a doctor. Clowns. Thank you, Fatima. You have my permission to use hashtag Sabby Salvage for segments doing clips with that Alex Jones rage. LOL. Love you and your audience. Let's get that new third party done ASAP. Hashtag free Palestine. Thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you, Kimi. Rula Jabril is amazing. She's the real deal. An amazing Afro-Palestinian intellect and voice. Thank you, Fatima. Love the red lips. Brand, please. Yes, this is Lip Bar. The Lip Bar. And it's black owned. The Lip Bar is black owned. At least I hope it still is. I hope she ain't sold it to nobody. But she appeared on what's the show where people come on to promote their product and they hope that I forget the name of it. You guys might know what I'm talking about, but I forget the name of the show. Anyway, she came on the show and she was trying to like get her business up and going. But it's called the Lip Bar. Yes. Thanks, Danny. Shark Tank. And she has all different colors and different styles. So definitely check her out. You can get it online. I order it online directly from them. But the Lip Bar. She also sells it at Target, but we ain't shopping there. Thank you, Dwayne. What happened October 7th? The IDF murdered most of their own people under the Hannibal Directive to justify genocide. Thank you as well, Fatima. The Red Lips brand, please. Great show tonight. Yeah, the lip bar. Oh, you may have already sent this. Sorry. And Kimi says, Eric Red, can you drop that beat for 170K? We can do that. Oh, you guys like the beat. We can do it. Let's get the rock fin and then I'll drop the beat. All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Imagine that Fox guy saying the same thing about any other group, Jews, blacks, Asians, etc., but is permitted to say it about Palestinians is so disgusting. And thank you for this as well. Thanks, Sabby, for having Scott on. I hope he's right about Trump. I'm a Jill Stein supporter, but if Trump is doing as Scott says he is, I will be happy to give Trump credit for it. Thank you so much for that. And that poll, ladies and gentlemen, would you vote for Stephen A. for president? We got 1,907 votes. 3% of you said yes if he ran as a Dem. 11% said yes if he ran independent. And 2% of you said yes if he ran as a Republican. But 83% of you said nope. Oh my God. I don't think they're feeling you, Stephen. I just want to say to you guys, thank you ever so much. We have reached 170K. I do want to put that up here on the thingy. Let's pull this up. Thank you guys so much. 170,000 subscribers. Guys, thank you so much. We're gonna drop the beat. When the beat drop. Hey! Dance with me. Do the pump. Shake your butt. Woo! Thank you guys. Dance with me. Dance with me. Do the bump. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it, you guys. That's it for me tonight. I will be live Friday evening. And Fatima said, LOL, I work for Target HQ. I'm sorry, Fatima. I will be live. Thank you, Kimi. Match me for the drop beat fund. And thank you for the super sticker, Ravina. Thank you so much. I will be live Friday evening. And one of the stories I'm going to do a deep dive into Hakeem Jeffries. I'm going to tell you about where he really came from and who Hakeem Jeffries really is. And I think you're going to want to see that. So don't miss that deep dive. I have other deep dives coming up in the future as well. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Woohoo!